infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Well, yeah, Randy, welcome on the show. We've talked several times. You are one of my patrons. You've come on the live chats, and you've also contributed to the main show in the form of, calling the hotline when I still had the hotline. The hotline's dead, by the way, guys, who are listening that might be trying to call that number. Nobody really used it, so what I did was I embedded a little recorder on the endofthefrayradio.com website, and you can just go to the homepage. You talk right into your computer or phone. It just seems a whole lot easier than the hotline. So that was just a quick side note now that I was mentioning the call-in that you did. So Randy, you're on the West Coast, but you lived quite a few places, and it looks like from the bullet point list that you sent me, thank you for doing that, you've had quite a number of experiences, and I don't know how much you wanted to discuss this or just maybe a yes or no, but considering this list, does that mean that this kind of runs in your family?
Oh, this definitely runs in my family. Pretty much my whole family experiences weird things. I would actually, as long as this bullet point list is, I would actually consider myself probably like the least bit of an experiencer when it comes to the people I was raised with in my family. Like everyone experiences things. A lot of my stuff that I experience is almost more like I'm paranormal adjacent. Like I'm in the room when something happens that may or may not have to do with me, and I don't always notice it, but other people around me do. But that's a little weird sometimes. So I would say I'm probably one of the least sensitive in my family, but I've still been around a lot of weird stuff.
I mean, yeah, I guess if you have enough going on, if something like paranormally adjacent, I like that term. If you have enough going on that you don't even notice it, that's kind of remarkable.
I don't think it's that I don't notice it, just because like there's so much. It's just like I'm just not as sensitive to it as a lot of people in my family. Like there's like all the way as far up as I know is up on my mom's side. I don't know much about my dad's side of the family. He's not really in the picture. But all up on my mom's side of the family, like I have my mom's permission to mention this, but like she had so much stuff happen to her when she was a kid and a teenager, and had so many experiences with like sleep paralysis and other bad things, that she, even at one point as a teenager, like attempted suicide just to make it stop. And then some other like weird semi-miraculous thing happened that like kind of halfway, that kind of saved her. And if I have time later, I can go into that if you want to. But yeah, so that my family experiences tons of things, and there are a lot of them. Like my mom, my grandma was apparently always into like, she always flirted with like neo-paganism, Wicca, Druid stuff, and she bounces back and forth between that and Christianity. My mom, and how I was raised, was like extremely hardcore charismatic, non-denominational Christian, like people falling on the floor, speaking in tongues type of crap. So it was just, there's, even though people are very sensitive to things in my family, most of them, like my mom and different, like, if it weren't for the Christianity, they might consider themselves like almost like a mediums or something like that, but that's in their belief system, that's bad. And so they try and either ignore things, or they think everything is demons or whatever. And I'm much more open-minded with the paranormal than some of them are, but Yeah, that's my family is very strange.
If at any point, of course, I'm going to a place you don't want me to go, just say, no, we're not going to talk about that and we'll move on. But considering the fact that you just mentioned their faith and then they would lean towards something demonic, does that then mean that when your mom was younger, when she looks back, and that's, very dark, by the way, of course, I'm sure that's hard for her to even talk about, her thinking about suicide, it got so bad. Does she attribute that to some kind of a demonic presence and demonic activity around her back then?
Yeah, absolutely. My grandmother, her mom, was extremely abusive and kind of she's still mentally unstable. If she's not on her meds, she can be a very mean person. When she's on her meds, she's very nice and sweet and happy-go-lucky. But when she wasn't, and she wasn't when my mom was a kid, like she can be very dark. And so between her own darkness and, at least in my mom's opinion, her flirtations with the pagan, like my mom thinks that there was a lot of bad stuff around when she was a girl, and yeah. So, and I do have her permission to go into some of that. I don't know if you want me to focus on my bullet list first and then see if we have time, or if you want me to talk about that a little bit. It's up to you.
Maybe just cover a little bit of it, because I think that a lot of times the history of the family and the background, it really can play a very important part as far as your personal experiences going forward.
Yeah. So my mom, she always saw weird stuff. She'd have tons of sleep paralysis things, or things would hold her down in her bed or whatever. But we didn't know the word sleep paralysis until much later. In her mind, she was being held down by demons or spirits and tortured that way. She physically sees things that she believes are demons. Like, not so much anymore. She used to see them tons when she was a kid. And so she would see bad things. She saw, like, one time as a little girl, she saw like an evil doppelganger of herself go and murder her pet hamster by twisting its head around backwards. And she was hoping it was a bad dream until her mom came home and found the hamster dead in the cage and stuff and blamed her. And it wasn't her. I was raised by this woman, and she definitely doesn't have a second personality that goes around murdering pets. And so it's very dark stuff. And like my grandma with her psychological problems. Like there was times when she was into really dark stuff for my mom. One time I think she was said that she went into her mom's room. I don't know if she's trying to wake her up or needed something or whatever it was, but she like opened the door and it was just like felt like a wall of darkness and shadow and evil in the room, and she looked over towards her mom's bed, and even though her mom was asleep, she could see a little bit of like a red glowing, almost like red glowing eyes overlaid my grandma's sleeping eyes. And it's like, that's the stuff like that. And so between all the bad things she would see, all the physical abuse that she experienced, and then especially when she started becoming, I think a lot of the sleep paralysis stuff kind of happened around when she went through puberty. So that's when it started. And so sometime around like the age of 16, it just got so bad. It was her seeing so many bad things and like being terrified of the things that she was seeing, that and she was up in Alaska at this time. And so I believe she said it was winter. She basically went out by herself. I don't know if it was night or just early in the morning when people were sleeping or whatever, but she basically went out in a nightgown in winter when it was below zero, and went off somewhere in the woods and lay down in the snow and was just ready to die, and just to make it stop. And basically to said to God and whoever was listening that like I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And laid there in the snow and was probably going hypothermic and started feeling numb and warm and was drifting off, and heard something that she described kind of like a voice telling her like, no, it's not your time. This isn't going to happen. I don't remember. I don't know the exact words, but something along those lines. And then like a bit of snow fell off a tree onto her face to kind of shock her. And then she said that she almost felt like she didn't think she could move. She had taken all her clothes off too, except for like her underclothes. Even though she felt that and something was telling her that, no, you need to not do this. She couldn't really move because she was like, had been out there long enough and it was cold enough. And she like felt something almost like lift her up and get her on her feet because she couldn't do it herself. And just to the point where she could kind of stumble along and grab her clothes, and she went back home and didn't go through with it. And after that, things mostly stopped from what she tells me until she became pregnant with me. And when she became pregnant with me, things started up a little bit again. Yeah, and so she sees things off and on since then, but it's nowhere near like it was when she was a kid.
Jeez.
So that's an example of, yeah, and she's not the only one of her sisters. She has three sisters that went through weird stuff. They all went through weird stuff. I think hers was the most extreme, except for maybe something more recent I heard about one member of the family, and I'm not allowed to talk about that because I'm not supposed to know about it. But yeah.
These stories of abuse are really tough to hear about. And I mean, what a unique situation. On top of it, she's obviously out in Alaska. I don't know how rural. A lot of places are very rural there, obviously. But
it would have been in Fairbanks, which is it's a city kind of in central Alaska.
Yeah.
I don't know how big it is because I haven't been there since I was a baby, apparently. So I've been to Anchorage like as a teenager and stuff, but Fairbanks, I've been there, but I haven't been there recently enough to remember it. But I know it's a city in like central Alaska.
Strong lady, though. I mean, to go from that kind of darkness and to choose just to walk out into the snow like that, and then have something intervene, right? And she's like, "Okay, I get it. I'm supposed to stay. Cool. I got this." So strong lady.
Yeah. Yeah, not even all my siblings know about that. I'm the child who gets told all the things that not everyone knows. But I did ask her a few minutes ago when I was thinking of me talking to you if what she felt about me mentioning that, and she said it was okay. So
okay,
yeah.
That I mean, doesn't that mean that the siblings might hear, or do they not? They wouldn't even know that you came on. Or they wouldn't.
They might. It's possible that they might.
And that's
said
okay.
that to her, and she said it's okay. Like I'm not going to point it out to them and like necessarily put this in their face, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she says it's okay.
All right. Well,
I checked.
Well, thanks, Mom. Thanks for allowing Randy to share that with us. Well, Randy, do you want to start here on your list?
Yeah. So with my stuff, basically my earliest memories, and just to preface this, I also had a very rough childhood where I'll basically just say that I was never one of those people who would ever wish to be a kid again. I'm very happy being an adult. So I also had my own rough childhood. But so that plays into this first story where my earliest memories are something that we always figured was some sort of night terror or something like that, where I remember being a little kid, maybe, I don't know, 3 or so years old, and I was always terrified to go to bed at night because I don't remember it was the foot or the head of my bed, but either the foot or the head of my bed, there was a window with some sort of blinds or slats, some sort of horizontal slatted something that covered the window. And I never wanted to go to bed because I knew that there was this big, evil gray cat that waited on the other side of that window. If it saw me see it, it would basically jump through the window, not break anything or disturb anything, almost like it phased through the window like it wasn't there and just start mauling me. And so I would be terrified to go to bed because I would know this thing was waiting out there and I would know I wasn't supposed to look because if I looked, it would attack me. But curiosity would get the better of me. And at some point I would almost inevitably like try and peek through a crack in the blinds just to see if it was there. And its eye would see me and this thing would just like jump through the window and maul me and attack me. So my mom and my birth father would come into the room with me screaming and stuff. And there wouldn't, of course, wouldn't be anything there. And they figured I had night terrors. And I don't remember this as dreams. I remember this as real life. But again, I was little. And then, so the thing that made this weird was years later, I think I was an older teenager, maybe even a young adult. My grandmother and my mom were talking, the grandmother who was into all the neo-pagan type stuff. And my mom had mentioned, like, they were talking about like my childhood and the things that I went through. And my mom had mentioned like all the night terrors I had around that age. And my grandma got very, very upset. And she said, no, that's not true. That's not true. And like, well, yes. And mine was like, well, yes, it was. Like, I mean, we would always run the room. He'd have these tears. And my grandma got really mad and said, that's not true, that she sent it to protect me. And then my mom immediately went into Mama Bear. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? So apparently, and I don't know the name of this cat. My mom's told me before, but I don't remember what she said it was called. I don't think I met it. But apparently when my mom was younger, probably before I was born, my grandma had this big gray cat, had a certain name, whatever, and eventually it passed away. And when my grandma was into I mean, she's messed with it her whole life, but at that point in her life, when she was doing I think it was probably Wicca and Druidism or whatever, at that point, she thought that she had these spirit guides. And one of her spirit guides was the spirit of her deceased big giant gray cat, whatever its name was. And apparently, knowing the type of child, like knowing like, my grandma, despite all her problems, she's always loved me tons. Like I was always like one of her special grandkids. And she apparently sent her spirit guide that she thought was this deceased large gray cat as a protective spirit to protect me right around that age from all the bad things that like I was dealing with. And so she had sent her spirit guide to protect me. And we didn't know this, but at the same time, she sent this big giant gray cat thing that was supposed to protect me. I have all these memories of this evil gray cat thing jumping through the window and mauling me and attacking me. And so, yeah. And so whatever she was messing with was definitely not what she thought it was and was not good. That's probably one of my two earliest memories.
Yeah, because it seems like, I mean, even at that young age, for you to have such a visceral reaction immediately to seeing this thing, right? And always knowing, you just knew in your heart of hearts, this thing is very, very bad. So somehow she had gotten it wrong, right? This thing that she sent to protect you.
Exactly. Yeah, she had gotten it wrong. And
wow.
Yeah, it's just, that's more than coincidence. Like, that's just weird and stuff. And whatever this was bad and went where she asked it to, but was not doing what she wanted it to do.
Randy,
so there was something there.
Yeah. Do you know how, I don't know if powerful is the word, or maybe skilled. Do you know how skilled someone would have to be in dark arts like that to be able to conjure something like that, good or bad? You know, to be able to conjure something that someone else can physically see and feel.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
No clue. I have no experience.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I was just wondering. That's a crazy. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm good with questions on that. If you want to go to the next, if that's where you were going.
Yeah. And so next thing was somewhere probably not much later, maybe 4 or so years old. I had something and this was a recurring nightmare, and this actually was a nightmare, but it was linked to something real, which I found out when I was a little bit older, which was odd, is I always had this recurring dream of being in this apartment or house, whatever that we lived in. And also in this house, just as an aside, like it'd be weird because my mom would mention weird things like how my toys would sometimes toys on wheels or whatever would come out of my room, their own volition, and go down the hallway and stop at my feet. And sometimes they would like take turns and stuff to get to me and stuff. So there'd be weird things where like my toys would supposedly do that. I have no memory of that. But I think this was that place, and I don't know if it happened in more than one place. But in this particular place where I had this recurring dream, I remember it'd be evening time, nighttime. I was playing with my toys in the living room, and basically at perpendicular angles to me in one direction, like say ahead of me, was a dining room, and it would be my mom and her second husband and a group of friends, and they were all playing cards and just kind of hanging out, having fun. And so that would be ahead of me. And then at a 90-degree angle to my right would be the hallway down to the bedrooms and the rest of the house. And I would be sitting there in the living room, hallway would be dark, and I'd be playing with my toys. And I'd look down the hallway and I would notice that the darkness at the end of the hallway, the shadows were kind of coalescing and becoming thicker and more tangible, that a presence was building that was dark and evil. And I didn't know what it was, but all I knew is that it was evil and bad. This thick, almost liquid, tangible shadow mass that never took a form would start encroaching down the hallway towards the living room, towards us. And I would know, just absolutely know, that whatever this was, it wanted to kill us. And so I would freak out and I would get up and I'd run over to the kitchen table to get their attention, say, we got to get out, we got to get out. And I would be not only mute, but somehow invisible. And I'd be shaking them and trying to yell at them, and they wouldn't see or hear me. And this thing would come and come, and then the dream would end. And this was a recurring dream that happened many, many, many times. And then another one of those things. So I get older and I'm talking about this, like I had a couple other recurring dreams, but this was the only one like that's connected to something. I would talk to my mom about this particular recurring dream that I had when I was little. And she kind of got freaked out and said that was that place. And I asked her what she meant. And so when she was pregnant with one of my sisters, her and like us and there was another brother between me and my sister. I'm the oldest. So we were living in a place with my mom's second husband, and that particular house that was set up that way, there was a bedroom at the very end of that hallway. And that was supposed to be the nursery for my little sister when she was born. My mom was still pregnant. My mom says that this place was haunted, and that room in particular was haunted, and that whatever was in there was bad, because she said that she would frequently, especially when she was by herself, she would hear a baby crying from that room, even though there was nothing in there. And there was a couple times where she heard that baby crying, and she'd go in there, and of course the room is empty. But as soon as she walked in, and again, my mom is an experiencer and stuff, and if she wasn't so hardcore Christian, she might consider herself a medium, but that's bad in her mind. So she went into that room, and whatever it was, like the crying would stop, and she would just have this like feeling of dread and hate and bad. And so she was terrified of my sister being born and that being her nursery, because whatever was bad in that house liked to live in that room. It scared her enough that she badgered her husband, my sister's dad, into moving. Like it was like she fought him on it, and he didn't want to because he thought she was being silly. He didn't really experience things. And she fought him on it. And whatever she did, she convinced him we're moving, and she moved. And they left before my sister was born. And he always made fun of her for it, but until the very last day when they were moving out, he went into that room to grab the very last box. I guess as he was grabbing the last box in that room, as they were walking out the door, he heard the baby cry start. And it flipped him out, and he came running out of the house with that box. And so that was the only time he ever experienced anything, but they both had that, and then of course, more real experiences with it. So again, that was definitely a dream that I had, but it was connected to something that was apparently really there and really in that space. And I don't know if I have unremembered memories about that caused those dreams, or there was something affecting my dreams. I can't say that, but that was another real thing that was connected.
At least the husband at the end got to experience that, so he's not going, oh, you're just being silly, it's your imagination. He came running out of the house after that one.
Yeah, and he was an atheist and stuff too, and so it was like it was apparently an eye-opening experience for him, though he still was always an atheist when I was a kid.
I was I was recording just yesterday with another patron member, Edward. He's in the UK, so
Mhm.
he's not usually able to join in the live chat. So you may not really know him very well, but he was talking about a baby cry story and how much of a nope that kind of a thing is. You know, when you don't have a baby and there's a damn baby crying.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's bad enough when that happens in the woods. It's worse when it happens in your own damn house.
Yeah, big no thanks on that one.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's mostly the stuff from when I was like a young kid. There was one place that we lived when I was in like the first 2/3 of elementary school where I remember a few times when I would go to bed at night, like waking up in the middle of the night and looking towards my open closet and seeing like some kind of like red orange glowing what looked like eyes in the top of the closet, like up where the shelf would be in the top of the clothing closet. At one point, I decided that, oh, that must be some glow in the dark sticker type thing because I had like glow in the dark stars, like, you know, the old green glow in the dark stars that you would stick on your ceiling of your bedroom or whatever. And so apparently I decided that I must have something in there except it's like kind of a red orange color. And I moved on with my life and didn't think much of it until literally just a couple months ago. I thought about that. And so I did a quick Google search and like a red orange glow in the dark type thing for like children's toys didn't really become widely available until something like the year 2000, which was much later than when I was a little kid. And so whatever I remember seeing up there couldn't have been a red orange glowing star. So that was kind of weird, but I have nothing else on that. It was just something that freaked me out that would happen every once in a while.
Also, kind of
And
weird that sorry, just real quick, when your mom said she would watch her mom sleeping, she would see the red eyes over her mom's closed eyes.
yeah, and my mom did say my mom had seen that one other time in her life when around the time when I was a teenager, she became an RN. One of the times she was working in like a psych ward wing of the hospital, there was one particular patient where only one, where she went into the room and I went and saw the exact same thing, whereas like the patient was sleeping, but there was that like overlaid red eyes over like the lady's eyes. So
Mm.
she did see that with a second person for like later in her life. So yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know the history on that person, right? Then, I mean, if it ties into what your grandmother was into.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Like, I mean, I don't know what that lady's diagnosis was. I don't know anything about the patient, just that it happens. And that she was an older lady. But I mean, my mom worked around tons of people. She has other stories too. But that's the only other like glowing eye thing that I know about that was like on person. The only other thing from when I was like pretty young before I was a teenager was not necessarily a paranormal thing, but it was definitely odd. And at the very least, it was like almost like whether you want to call it a guardian angel or some sort of protection or very happy coincidence type situation. We were living in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. There was at the end of the street of this particular house that we were living in, it was basically you go a block and a half down the street that we were on, and it was open desert. And there was tons of like escaped wild dogs that lived in the desert and were extremely aggressive because it was a desert and they were hungry, and so they would attack people's farm animals and different things like that. And so one day, as like an older kid, but before I was a teen, I was going for a walk and I was going that direction, and this young, not full on puppy, but like almost like whatever the dog equivalent of a teenager is, like this young kind of pit bull pup ran up to me out of nowhere. I'd never seen it before. For a split second, I was like, oh, this is a nice one because it wasn't a nice neighborhood. Like there's all sorts of gang activity. And so there's a high chance that if there's a pit bull in that neighborhood that it's going to be raised by people who want aggressive dogs. But the dog was like wonderful. It ran up to me, melted at my feet, and was wiggling all over. And I was petting it and loving this little pup and like, oh, this is great. And so it basically tags along for me for my walk. and I'm walking, and at one point I'm walking near the edge of that desert at the end of the street, and this pack of probably 8 to 12 various breeds of desert dogs, to like wild dogs, comes charging out of the desert, snarling and barking and growling and charging straight towards me. And I'm 6'1" now, but I was very, very short and tiny then. They'd killed people before from what I remember. And so I figured, great, I'm done for. It's just me and this pack of like a dozen dogs, and like, what the hell am I supposed to do? And this young pit puppy that was walking with me, all by itself, charges towards the pack of dogs that's charging me, and somehow manages to scare off this entire pack of like a dozen dogs, all of which are bigger than it. I don't know how it scared it off or why that worked, but it did. And it scared them all off. And if it hadn't been there with me, I would probably be dead. Scared them off and came back to me and melted at my feet some more and let me pet it. And then it ran off and I never saw it again. So that was one of those things where it could have been a real dog and likely was a real dog, but it was just a very odd, happy situation that I did not die that day.
That's a cool story. I like that one.
Yeah. So that's all when I was a younger kid. And then as a teenager, a few things happened. So I started moving around as a teen just because my home situation was really bad. So there was a point after ninth grade where I lived with various family members just to be out of the house so that I wouldn't end up hurt. Or yeah, my mom was afraid that me or her husband at that time, that one of us would hurt the other because he was extremely abusive, and at some point she figured either he would seriously injure or kill me and end up in jail, or I would find a gun and, so it was a bad situation. And so she sent me to live with various family members. So one of the places I went was with one of my aunts up in Alaska. And this is the one where I sent you those pictures. If you see the picture of that house that said like Alaska house, and this is in Anchorage, right? And so I was at the house there. My aunt and uncle were gone. And it was basically just a bunch of us teenagers, like me and my cousins and their various boyfriends. And if you look at the picture of the house that I sent you, there's steps leading up to a front door,
Mm-hmm.
and the window to the left, and that's a living room. And we were all basically in that room having a pizza party. There's no adults around. We were having a pizza party, just hanging out, having a fun time. And it was late at night. In the middle of just very, very suddenly, it was like a boom, boom, crash. And something slammed against that front door. There wasn't glass there at that time. It was a solid door. Something slammed against that door so hard that the door almost broke off its hinges, and the lamp, like the porch lamp that was hanging on the wall next to it, broke off and fell on the ground. And whatever this was, we never heard it building up its speed or anything, or running like on the concrete or anything. We just heard two loud, extremely fast, like stomping steps, and then a slam as this, whatever it was, hit the door super hard. And we all, of course, jumped and screamed, and especially some of the ladies, teenage girls, and lots of screaming and squealing. And we froze for a second, and then a couple of us guys, like me and a couple of my cousin's boyfriends, we of course had to be macho, and we go and we open the door to see what the hell, and there's nothing there. And we see the lamp broken off, and we're looking around and we don't see anything. And so we look around. I think a couple of us grab like some improvised weapons, like baseball bats and butcher knives or whatever, and we all decide as a group that we're going to go walk through the house and see if someone tried to break in, because on the right of the picture you can see there's like a little garage and stuff, and there's another entrance to the house down there next to where the car is, so you can go in the house from down there also on the bottom floor. And so we sweep the house, being all macho, looking for a possible intruder, like maybe they've gone around to the side to go in there. There's no one in the house. And we go back out in the yard in this big group. This house sits on a road, and at the end of the road is like is a kind of a small-ish forest. And then less than a mile away in a different direction is like the full-on woods in nature. And so we go out and we look down the road towards the woods, which I sent you a picture of, like the woods at the end of that road. And at the end of the road, at like basically the tree line, even though it's pretty dark, we think we see the outline of some large humanoid somebody standing there. And what is that? So we start walking down the street slowly, hyping each other up slowly, cautiously walking down the street with all the ladies huddled behind us and all of us going. As we get closer, the form of this thing kind of just like disintegrates into the rest of the shadows. Like we don't see it walk away or leave or run or anything. It kind of just like fades away. And so we stop and like, yeah, we're not going to go any closer to the woods. That was just a kind of a weird thing. And it didn't seem like, with how fast the thing was moving when it did those two stomps and hitting the door like this, and the amount of force that hit, it seemed more than what a man should have been able to do. Like it seemed stronger than a man. Like we were even like thinking we would see a moose. I've walked in those woods and walked around a tree, and I was 6 feet away from a bull moose taller than I was. And I mean, there's a moose in those woods, and in the satellite photo, you can see that full-on nature is not very far away, again, like less than a mile away. So there's all sorts of moose and different animals. I found moose skeletons in those woods. So we figured it had to be something huge, like a moose or a freaking bear or something, but we saw a humanoid looking shape, and then it faded into the shadows. So we don't know for sure that was paranormal, but it definitely didn't seem like it was human, and it seemed very, very odd. So that was a weird thing.
So to you, that was something paranormal and not maybe a Bigfoot encounter?
I've never thought of that as a Bigfoot thing. If it were a Bigfoot thing, like the way it just melted away without moving, it would almost have to be one of those paranormal Bigfoots, if you want to, like, however you feel about that, where it somehow cloaked itself or went into ninja mode or something, because it never moved. It just like melted away. Like it just, yeah, like as we were getting closer to it. And so there was some sort of paranormal aspect to it. So whether it was full on paranormal or if there's a paranormal Bigfoot or whatever you want to call it, it was weird. So there was that. And there's nothing more to that. It was just a weird thing that happened that we talked about every once in a while. Just messaged my cousins just 2 days ago that asked them to like confirm or add any other things. And that's pretty much the story. That's all there was to it.
Well, yeah, thanks for checking on that to see if there's anything extra. I appreciate that. Have you ever come across, and of course it takes a person to make a report for there to be a report, and a lot of times they don't want to do that, but have you ever come across any reports from that general vicinity, because there are Alaska Bigfoot reports? Have you ever come across any from around that area, or any similar, anything coming up to a door like that?
So I haven't looked at Alaska. I've looked at other places where I've lived, because I've lived along the Sierras and also the Cascades in different various points in my life. So I've looked in those areas where I've lived, but I've never looked at Alaska on like the FRO or anything like that. So that I do not know. But I would imagine with how close we are to like straight up nature there in the satellite photo, I would imagine that there's got to be stories. There has to be.
I just pulled up bfro.net, and Anchorage, Alaska has 2 of them. One from February 2004. It's a Class A, which means there was something cited. It's their classifications, and it says snowmobiler has encounter in deep snow near Potter, Alaska. And so this one was Potter, Alaska, and then a Class B was December 2003. 4 nocturnal hikers get pelted with snow near Anchorage. So there is an Anchorage one in there, but that is it.
Yeah, this would have been right around 2002-ish.
2002.
Somewhere around there.
Okay.
Yeah, is when this would have happened.
Where's the next
Yeah, because
closest kind of sort of large city there? Do you know? Would it
I mean, Anchorage is the biggest one by far.
yeah.
Um, I know, I know we go down to Seward. That's kind of like a little fishing town. That would be
Okay.
the only other place I would
Okay, yeah. And
see.
I
I mean,
see Seward, but there's no reports from there. I see a couple from Fairbanks and
yeah, and
Sussex.
Fairbanks is very far away.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah,
all right. Well, anyway,
Alaska
I
is
just
gigantic,
I was
so
just
that's
checking that real quick.
totally fine.
But all right. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
an
I know the
interesting
capital
story.
is kind of like June, which is pretty far south. There's not a ton Anchorage is the biggest thing around. Seward I've been to. I don't know about Whittier or anything. Wasilla up north from Anchorage. My grandma lived there for a little bit, so I've been around Wasilla and in the woods in there, but I didn't have anything weird happen there. But I've spent very little time there.
Yeah, I guess it's
And so,
tough.
yeah,
It's tough to call it a classic Bigfoot encounter if you don't see it, because that's just where my mind went, obviously.
yeah,
And
yeah. I thought
I
about that
shouldn't have done
either.
that, but it's just where it went. But if you don't see it stepping back away, because I just thought, oh, okay, so it just kind of quickly like stepped back into the woods because you said it was dark, right? So it's like, oh,
Yeah,
maybe it
and
just
it wasn't
stepped.
clear enough of a view for me to have a
Mm-hmm.
firm enough outline to say, oh, it has that big wide shape. I just knew it was tall and big and humanoid,
Right.
but it wasn't clear enough for me to have a clear outline and know for sure the shape of it besides humanoid.
Well, that's like people telling me with my encounter, oh, it was 4 Bigfoot running in the woods. No, it definitely wasn't. I mean, that I saw very clearly. That's
Yeah,
different from yours,
exactly.
but yeah, I mean, that was my fault for automatically trying to label that a biggie. Not
No, I
everything
thought
is
about it.
biggie,
I was telling it to you that it sounds like it could be that, but that'd be cool, but I don't have anything to back that up.
right?
So let's see. So one thing that I would always joke about as a teenager was that I had Bob the Friendly Ghost, and there was no particular reason for me to call it Bob, except I thought Bob was a funny name because there was some movie I think I saw in the 90s where someone had a dog named Bob, and I thought it was a funny name for a dog, so I got stuck on the name Bob for a while. And so I would have weird things happen. This happened both in the house in the desert and where I had the dog experience, and then also after moving around through a few different family members when I was a young teen, my mom finally divorced my sister and youngest brother's dad and remarried a third time. So I eventually moved back down to where they were. He was good to us kids. He was very bad towards my mom, but he was good towards us kids, at least. So I didn't personally experience anything bad from him. But we moved down to where they were. So both the desert house and then also his house, I would have things happen where we would get home from somewhere and I'd be the first one walking up towards the front door. And either as I was reaching for the door handle, the front door would kind of just pop open on its own, just kind of pop open like an inch or two. I'm like, oh, it's open. That's weird. And walk in and oh, you forgot to lock the door. And somehow I happen to, I didn't at first think about it, just thought it was odd. And the door would just pop open in front of me as I was reaching for the handle. Like, okay, that's weird. And then later that stopped happening, but I would frequently get home and go through the door and I would check the handle before I tried to lock because I didn't want to get my keys out of my pocket and it would be open all the time. And so I'd always give the family crap about leaving the front door open, especially the type of places that we lived. And so whatever. And then they'd always say, no, we locked it. We locked it. At one point when we were at the house with my mom's third husband, there was one time where I had gone to the next door neighbor's house and I was there late playing video games or whatever. And I came back home probably around midnight or so, and I went to reach for the door and I opened it up and it opened right up. And on the other side of the door was my next youngest brother looking very shocked and a little bit white in the face. I'm like, dude, what's up? And he's like, how did you do that? I'm like, how did I do what? He's like, how'd you just walk in the door like that? I'm like, because it was unlocked. He's like, no, it wasn't. I literally just came here. I locked the door, locked the deadbolt, And I turned around and the deadbolt slammed open and he walked through the door. I'm like, no, bro, that didn't happen. Like, I didn't leave my keys are in my pocket. I just walked in. You must have been mistaken. And he was adamant that no, he had locked the door. And so after that, I started just calling it Bob the Friendly Ghost because he would open doors for me. And that's pretty much all Bob ever did. There was just kind of a funny thing that would happen, and not much more to it than that, but it made us laugh. And we would always laugh about Bob.
And he only did that for you?
Yes, only for me. And so another aside with that is, which is kind of weird. So where I work now, there's this lady, she believes that she's a medium and stuff. And for all I know, she very well maybe. She's a very difficult, combative, not nice person, and maybe a little bit off her rocker, but that doesn't preclude her from being a medium. Like, that's one thing when people say, oh, someone's crazy. Like, yes, someone can be crazy, but even if they're crazy, that doesn't mean that they don't also have concurrent paranormal experiences mixed in with the crazy that all gets jumbled together. So she says she's like very sensitive and a medium or whatever. There's nothing I can do but take her at her word for that. I have no way to know either way, but she, as soon as she met me, would quietly talk to me about how she sees this old man following me around. And so it's like, oh, did your dad pass away? Like, he kind of looks like he's tall and lanky, and maybe he's your dad. I'm like, no, my dad lives down in Southern California. I don't really talk to him, but he's there. I know he's alive. She's like, oh, some other relative. I'm like, there's no one that I knew who looked like me who passed away in my life. And she kept on insisting that there's this person here at various points whenever I would see her, because I don't work with her too much because I work on a different shift. At one point, I was thinking about it, humoring her, and I said, well, my great-grandfather passed away when my mom was pregnant with me. He kind of looked like me. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and his name was Bob. And so she immediately latched on to, like, oh yeah, that must be who it was. It must have been your great-grandfather. And my mom was his favorite grandkid, I guess. And like, they always had a nice, special, happy relationship. And he passed away when she was like probably 4 or 5 months pregnant with me. And so the lady immediately latches onto that and says, oh, that must be who's following you around. He must have decided to fall around his favorite grandkid's kid and protect him, or, you know. And I just thought it was funny because his name was Bob. So it's almost like a joke now that Bob the Friendly Ghost is really Bob the great grandpa. But there's absolutely nothing concrete to back any of that up. And I don't fully take that seriously. It just kind of makes me smile a little bit that if that were true, that'd be kind of fun.
Do you have doors that open for you still to this day?
No, absolutely not. No, that stopped. So it was only in the 2 houses. It was the one that was there on the edge of the desert, and then it was that second house with my mom's third husband. So those were the only 2 places that the door thing would happen. Like, I think the desert house was when it would full on pop open in front of my hand as I was reaching for the doorknob. And then in the second house, that's when I would just think that they were always leaving the door unlocked, but they weren't. And so that after that didn't happen anymore after I left that place. So no, if Bob the Friendly Ghost is still around, he's not opening doors for me. But I mean, I've always had like something or someone, which of course my mom would absolutely say has to be God or an angel. But I believe there's a lot more diversity in the weird realm than just God and angels and demons. I think there's more to it than that. But I've always had I've had multiple situations where something probably should have killed me, and something happened where it didn't happen. Like, there was the dog thing. There was one time we were driving on a back highway late at night behind a semi truck, and this big, probably 8-inch chunk of steel broke off the bottom of the semi truck and bounced and flew up into the air and was heading straight towards where I was in the front passenger seat. We could see this coming. It was like one of those slow motion things where it's happening too fast for you to react and jerk the car, but you can still see it because of the adrenaline. It was heading straight towards me, and it was another one of those situations like, oh, there we go, I'm a goner, I'm about to get plastered. and literally 3 feet in front of the windshield, this thing somehow, and I'm on the passenger side, this thing somehow 3 feet in front of the windshield swipes around in like an arc and goes left around the driver's side of the car and slams into the back left tire and bounces the car over like a few inches. Doesn't pop the tire, thank goodness, and or make it spin out or anything, but like it hits the tire very hard and we all feel the car jump and shudder and we almost lose control. So there's things like that. There's another time in the Navy where someone told me to open up a magazine sprinkler valve, which I'd never done before. And I didn't know that there was a giant, like 18-inch spring inside there that was so heavy duty that at the time I was lighter than I am now. Like I was like around 160 or 165 pounds. If I stood on that spring, it would only compress maybe like half an inch to an inch. Inside this valve, they would use jack and bolts to compress it down to like maybe 6 inches, from 18 inches to 6 inches. So this was a ton of force. And I didn't know that spring was in there. And one of my chiefs like, oh, you have to go open up this valve and clean it. And he assumed I knew how they worked and I didn't. And I was in that room by myself. And so I was just taking off the bolts with a normal ratchet and this thing. And I had my face right over the top to cover the copper cover of this valve, and it exploded in my face. And my face should be probably somewhere in the back of my skull when that happened. And I should definitely be dead with the amount of force that was there. But somehow instead I got thrown 10 feet backwards through the air against the wall and only got a fat lip. So there's been various things throughout my life where something should have killed me and it didn't. So there's someone, whether it's God or a past relative or whatever, something's been looking out for me because I've had a few things like that through my whole life. And who knows, maybe that's Bob the Friendly Ghost and maybe he really is my great grandpa, but I have no way of knowing that.
Either way, whoever, whatever it is, thank goodness for them. I mean, that truck story, that is some Final Destination shiz right there.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Anytime I'm behind a truck that's got rebar or timber, I'm zipping right the hell by the second
and it wasn't
that I
even
can.
Anything in the bed of the truck. It was like one of the covered normal semi trucks and it broke off the bottom, the undercarriage of the truck. Like something broke off. And so that's how we first noticed it, because all of a sudden we see this huge shower of sparks beneath, because it's dark, beneath the truck as this thing breaks off and hits the blacktop. It sparks, and that's how we first noticed it. And then we see it bounce a couple times, and the way it bounced between the road and the bottom of the truck a couple times sent it flying up through the air straight towards my face, and we were too close behind the truck to react. So yeah, it was full on weird Final Destination type shit.
I mean, you'll see people just chilling behind one of these trucks. Just they're not blocking anything for you. Get around them. Like, I don't know why you're driving behind that truck. Have you not watched any of these horrifying movies? Even in The Descent, there's an opening scene. Their husband gets it like that. You know, it can happen. It does happen. So it's a PSA. Get the hell out of the way of those trucks. Just go around it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's something that's weird. Next on the list. So this one is one of the cooler ones. So one of your previous episodes, actually two of your previous episodes, you interviewed at one point a son and then later the father. The son was a Boy Scout, the father was a Boy Scout leader, and they had a camp out in like Ojai, California. And the dad had all sorts of weird stories from Ojai. And I remember in the dad's interview, he at one point mentioned the St. Francis Dam disaster and all the bodies that washed out towards southern Ventura and all that. So that's been mentioned before. I have been to where that dam was. So my mom's third husband, like we would always go on adventures and see different things. And usually they were out in the desert, but this particular time it wasn't. So St. Francis Dam was in San Francisco. I never say that name right. Francisco Canyon, which is basically between the Mojave Desert, Santa Clarita Valley, I believe, towards LA. And there was a dam there in the early 1900s. It was built by one of the major big shot engineering guys. And the story goes that the residents who lived in San Francisco Canyon beneath St. Francis Dam kept on hearing cracking and popping noises, and they were scared that there's something wrong with the dam. And so they complain about this enough that the guy who built the dam goes out for an inspection, and he inspects the dam and says, there's nothing wrong with the dam. It's perfectly fine. You you guys are overreacting. There's nothing going on. Literally that exact night, probably, I don't know. He did that during the day, and that night, sometime around midnight or a little bit later, I forget the exact time, sometime during the night, the dam collapses, wipes out virtually everyone who's living beneath this dam. It's a relatively narrow canyon, and it goes into Santa Clarita Valley, like where Six Flags Magic Mountain is, goes out that direction before emptying beneath. And there's different valleys and stuff there, but I think most of the people who died were probably in that canyon. And something like 400 something people died. On one edge of this canyon is an old ranch that was like the Pereira and Ruiz family ranch. Along the edge of the canyon, up on the hillside, as you go up to the hillside, was this old family cemetery that the Ruiz family built in like the 1880s, I believe, because like the one guy's wife, she wanted to be buried on the hillside whenever she passed away, and she passes away, so he makes a cemetery there. And so the Ruiz family and a couple other families, a bunch of people were buried there. But the thing was, is that something like 7 or 8 members of the Ruiz family all died during that dam collapse. And so, so backtracking a tiny bit. So my mom's husband, like he takes us, and this time instead of going out to the desert, we go out to, I mean, this is still desert, but we go find this where the dam collapsed, and we find the broken bits of the dam along the top of the canyon. They didn't replace the dam. They still have a power plant up there, but they didn't replace the dam, at least not there. Then he's like, oh, I'm going to go find the cemetery. He had like the GPS coordinates, and it's getting late, somewhere around like 11:30 at night. And it's like, this cemetery is supposed to be on private property. We finally find the address, like 11:30, midnight, somewhere around there, like very, very late. And it's like probably Friday or Saturday night. And he's like, let's just go in and see if they're up. It's like, dude, we're going to get shot. It's like almost midnight, and we're going to drive up on these people's property who don't know us this late at night. Like, they could shoot us. And he just doesn't give a shit. And he says, no, we're going. And so he drives in. And if you look at the aerial shot of the property, you can see there's the road, and right as you turn off the road going up towards that property, there's like a wash running through there. And so as soon as we turn in, we drive over that little wash. My sister and I believe one of my sisters and I believe my mom both hear a little girl laughing. And they're like, did you hear that? There's a girl laughing. And the rest of us didn't hear it. I'm like, no, no, no. And they swear they hear it. We keep on driving. We drive up to the house there, hoping we don't get shot. Thank goodness the family who lives there, and it's not the Ruiz family anymore, it's some other family, I believe, but the family who lived there at that time, and this would have been somewhere around probably 2003-ish, maybe 2004. So the family is all sitting on like the back porch, having drinks, hanging out, visiting. And so at least they're not sleeping or something. So they're all up and awake and outside, and we drive up and they look at us, but they're not flipping out, pulling guns on us or anything. And David, my mom's ex, pops out and starts talking to them and says like, oh, we found out about this place and the cemetery where a bunch of people are buried from the collapse or whatever. And he's a people person, and these people are extremely nice, and somehow decide to agree to let us hang out with them at like almost midnight, these random people who drove up on their property, and they start telling us ghost stories about things that have happened around the property, because basically we had heard that a lot of people who died in the dam collapse were buried up in the cemetery up on the hill, and he wanted to see the cemetery. And they're basically agree, yeah, you can go up and see the cemetery, that's fine. But before they do that, they start telling us some ghost stories. And so one of the first stories they tell us is that when people come onto the property, they'll drive through the wash and they'll hear a little girl crying because there was a little girl who supposedly drowned in a well or something like that. My mom and sister look at each other like, well, we heard a little girl laughing, and they're like, oh, that's so nice. Usually she's crying. That's so nice that she was laughing. Like, maybe that's a good thing. That almost, like, that doesn't happen. She's usually crying when people hear her. Like, okay, so that's weird. And they tell us a few other stories. Who knows if it's all true or if they exaggerate or not, but they tell us stories like where they painted a room and At one point, they have a fresh coat of paint on the wall, and they walk out, and they come back in a little bit later, and they see a child's handprint in the paint, even though they didn't have a kid. And they told another story where whether it was overnight or something, they had a yard with farm animals in it with a big, large metal water trough full of water. And at one point, however it happened, they went out there, and the trough was in a completely different place in the corral, still full of water, but there was no drag marks. And there would have been drag marks, like this thing was moved somehow without any drag marks. So they tell us all these stories, and like, oh, that's so crazy, so crazy. And then they give us permission. Then we decide they send us up to the cemetery, and they don't escort us or anything. There's like all this path, and even though it doesn't look like it on the map, it's up on a hill. And there's like one kind of dirt path that winds up the side of the hill, kind of around the left, and then goes to a gate up there, and it's all gated. And so we're up there walking up to the cemetery, and it's past midnight at this point, maybe even 1 a.m, because we talked to them for a while. And we poke around, and we see like the headstones for the Ruiz family, and there's like 7 or 8 people all buried, all the exact same date of death on there because of the flood. So that's just surreal to see everyone with the same date of death on there. And there's another corner that they call like the angel corner or the crying corner, where there's a bunch of lambs on the tombstones, and that's where like people's babies who's passed away were buried. And there's a bunch of people buried up there. Again, some of these go back to the 1800s. Some of them you can't even read the grave markers. It's just like a marker with nothing on it. And we go up there. I don't see or hear anything, but my mom thinks that she sees the shadow of a man standing underneath the pepper tree in the cemetery. And it freaks her out, but that's all she sees. And eventually we come back down. My mom's ex was an electrician. And one of the things that they mentioned to us is how they have all these electrical problems where they'll sometimes get shocked when they touch their fence by the house, or if they get into the shower, when they step into the water of the shower, they'll get a little tiny shock. And he's like, well, you guys have been so nice for letting us bother you this late at night. We'll come back when I get an off weekend, and I'll for free see if I can like figure out your electrical problems and fix it for you, since you guys are so kind to us for letting us go see this. And so we do that. So like 2-3 weeks later, it's me, David, which is my mom's ex, his friend Hector, and one other of my brothers. I forget which one. We go back. Hector and David, they work on the electrical thing for hours. I'm assuming that they fixed it. I didn't know what they were doing. Me and the brother were kind of just hanging out, talking to the lady and her parrot and all that. And eventually they finish up their work. Since Hector wasn't with us when we had gone exploring, he wants to see the cemetery. And so at this point, this is the middle of the day, hot middle of the day. We all, again, walk up the hill, look at the cemetery. It's all peaceful and nice or whatever. And he sees just how surreal it is with all the things. And that's that. And then we start walking down the hill. And so there's only the one way up and down this hill. These people are not technologically savvy in the slightest. And it's only the one lady home at this point. And as we're walking down that hill, all 4 of us freeze in our tracks, because from the cemetery, we hear what sounds like a young girl just shriek at the top of her lungs in that high-pitched little girl scream that girls have. It just once, it happened once, top of her lungs, shrill, shrieking, daddy. And we all 4 heard it, and we all 4 froze and looked up at the cemetery and said, what the F? And then we hurried out of there. So that was, I thought that was really cool. But yeah, just this crazy disembodied voice up in the cemetery, and there's definitely no one up there. And these people are not savvy enough to have some remote speaker or something set up. So I don't know. That was always a fun one.
Talk about your hair standing on end.
Oh yeah. So like all of us goosebumps, it was crazy. And it was loud.
Yeah, I wasn't really aware at all of that dam collapse. And then after you sent me the link, I started to look into it a little bit more, and just a tiny little snippet for anybody that doesn't know. It was on March 12th, 1928, and the dam had a 12.5 billion gallon capacity for water. And when it broke, it was a 180-foot high wall of water that went crashing down to the floor beneath. And it says, at least in this article that I found, it says 450 people were dead. And then in the one that you sent me, 411. But either way, bad number. And then it caused $25 million worth of livestock and property damage to be just completely washed away, gone. I mean, that's back then, 25 million back then for a loss. It's insane to even think about that, and let alone the loss of life, of course.
Yeah. One thing I forgot, one of the things that the people told us that night where we showed up is they claimed that the water didn't wash out that cemetery, that the wall water was built so that it was high enough, that cemetery is high enough up on the hill to where the water apparently didn't go over it. And so it's one of the only spots in the canyon in the valley that didn't get washed out. So all the graves are still there from the 1800s, which we saw some of them. And then they also claimed that before the Ruiz and Pereira families were there, that it was an indigenous Native American burial ground, was in the same spot supposedly.
And
yeah, and you know, there's always the Indian burial grounds.
Yeah.
But so that was another one of their claims, and I have no way of knowing if that's true or not, but that was one of the things they said. So let's see. So one thing I forgot to put in the bullet point list, I was talking to one of my sisters yesterday, and she reminded me of this. So there was one time where we were doing one of our desert adventures, and we were somewhere in southeastern California. We were somewhere near, again, a Native American burial ground area, and there was a canyon full of little tiny caves, and this canyon was just full of petroglyphs. It was gorgeous, like petroglyphs everywhere. Hundreds and hundreds of them. It was just beautiful. And we're respectful of those places. We're not one of those creeps that goes in there and chips off the petroglyphs or causes damage or anything like that. So we're just amazed checking out this place. And so at one point, 3 of my brothers decide to go up, explore some ridge line, while I go down below and check out one of these little, and they're very, very small caves. They only get like 7, 8 feet, tiny. And I go to explore one of the caves at the bottom of the hill. And we were kind of far away from where the ladies were, like my sisters and my mom, kind of far away. They're looking and they see my brothers up on the ridge line, the 3 of them. Then they see a 4th taller person walking behind them. They're like, oh, Randy must have went up there. Randy must be with them. A few moments after they say that to themselves, I come walking up from down below where I was still at the cavern, and they look back up at the ridgeline, and now there's only 3 of them. But there was 4, and whoever the 4th person was taller than any of them, and I'm taller than all of them. At least I was. And so there was a 4th person walking in line with my brothers, and my brothers, they came down and they're like, oh, who was up there with you? And they said, no one, it was just the 3 of us. But then my next youngest brother, he mentioned that at one point while they were up there, he wandered towards one of the cliff edges by himself. He almost fell over and he felt something pulling back. And so there was that. Yeah, so that's another thing. I didn't see whatever they thought was me, but I was there and they thought it was me, so I figured I'd include that.
That's
so
cool.
It's more my sister's story.
Yeah, no,
that was kind of a weird one.
Yeah, the 4th man, I like that.
Yeah. Last story from when I'm a teen. This isn't really paranormal, but we may have found the lair of some serial killer, and I wish we had reported this to the police. It would have been something from back in the day, like a cold case type thing. But we were again exploring the desert, and we found this mine somewhere. This mine was up on a hill, and behind the mine, behind the hill, was kind of a drop off, and we looked and we stood at the edge of that drop off, and we looked down, and below the edge of this drop off was like easily 8 or 10 older, like 40s and 50s style vehicles, all looked like they'd been shoved off the top of this hill and were behind this cave or behind this mine, like just tumbled down the hill, all wrecked behind there, like a dumping ground for cars. Like, huh, that's weird. And then we go exploring inside this mine, and there's limited areas where you can see, because there's an area where there's a collapse. But we poke around some of the other areas, and in the very back of one of the deepest parts of the mine that are still accessible, we find what's basically like we're assuming is like the lair of either some creep or like peeping Tom, possibly even rapist or killer or something like that. Because we go into this room in the back of the mine, and we find this pile of dozens of mismatched different sizes of women's shoes, only women's shoes, all different sizes, all different styles, just this huge pile of them, almost like a trophy collection. And a pile of a bunch of like empty packets of sugar. And that's it. And it's like, why would this be here? And the only thing we'd like of the speculative story that we came up with is like, oh, there's some either serial rapist or creep or something like that who is luring people out here and doing God knows what to the ladies and then dumping the cars over the back of the mine. And who knows what's actually true. It could have been just some guy who's stealing women's shoes and the cars just happened to be there, but it was weird. So that was kind of weird.
And what in the hell is with they're all empty sugar packets?
Yes, all empty, like almost like he was just eating sugar.
Oh,
Like a bunch of sugar, empty sugar, like tons and tons of empty sugar packets and different sizes of women's shoes, all looking really old. So it's something that would have happened a long time ago. So that was weird.
Wow.
Not paranormal, but just weird.
No, I love that. That's so yeah. And anything besides paranormal or Biggie would be true crime for me. So I love that stuff. But so the shoes, there were no matched pairs. They were all mismatched shoes.
All mismatched pairs.
Huh.
Honestly, it was like there'd be like one of every shoe, and again, all sorts of different sizes too.
Mm.
So it wasn't the same woman's shoes.
Yeah, is that like someone keeping one trophy and then trying to get rid of the other half of the? That's so weird. That is such a weird story. And then the empty sugar packets.
Have to wonder. Yeah, and you have to wonder if we had made that hill was steep where the cars were pushed down, but if we had managed to make our way down to those cars, would we have found anything in there? Like, who knows?
Right.
God knows.
Mm.
Yeah.
I like that one. That one's creepy as hell.
So that's it for my teens. Then I move into my 20s. So this next story, I believe I called in one of the call-in shows. It's pretty brief, but I was home on leave from the Navy. It was before my mom divorced her third husband, so it had to be something like 2006-ish, something like that. So I was home. The only person home was my mom. All my mom's husband was gone at work, and all my siblings must have been at school because it was just me and my mom. And basically, the immediate layout of where we were is if you imagine like kind of a blocky U shape. If you elongate the bottom of the U, that's a wall, and there's a couch there, and I'm sitting on that couch reading a book. And then the right arm of the U that goes up goes into the kitchen, and my mom is in there baking whatever she's baking because she loves baking stuff. And then to my left, kind of like on the left wall of the U, is what goes off to the rest of the house. And right there, right like 5 feet away from me to my left, is a giant stereo system with analog dials and everything. And so we're sitting there. I'm reading a book. My mom's baking in the kitchen, and she has some of her Jesus music blasting. I believe it was Carmen, which was some guy who would do a bunch of like kind of like speaking, like he would talk instead of sing a lot of the time. But she had this thing playing. I'm reading my book, and without looking directly at her, because I have no reason to think I need to, in my peripheral vision, watch her walk across from right to left, go over to the stereo, and turn the dial of the stereo all the way down to 0. And I kind of like lose track of her right there, right next to the stereo. And without looking up from my book, I'm like, "Hey, Mom, why'd you turn down your music?" And she answered me from the kitchen and said, "I thought that was you." And so I'm like, "What the?" I look over towards the kitchen. She's there. I look back to the stereo. There's nobody there, but the analog dial, the analog volume dial on this stereo is pegged at 0. I watched something that I assume was my mom walk across in front of me and physically turn this analog dial all the way down to 0. At that time, I wasn't as open-minded about the paranormal stuff as I am now, so I was more on track with my mom's ideas. I'm like, "Up, it's a demon," and so I Said, oh, hell no. And I went over and I blasted her music. Said, we ain't going to deal with any of that. And that was it. And I mean, I wasn't even super, like, there was no like dark anything presence. And who knows what it was. It could have just been a poltergeisty type thing that had nothing to do with demons. Who knows? It didn't feel anything bad, but it turned down the Jesus music. So I said, no, that's no good. And I turned it back up. And that was it. But it was weird because I saw whatever this was, but I can't say for sure if it was just like an outline of a person or if it was a full-on doppelganger of my mom. Like, I don't know because I never looked fully directly at this thing. I just watched it in my peripheral.
Maybe it was just Bob. Bob didn't like that kind of music. I don't know.
No, actually, the lady at work, I told her that story, and that's what she said too. She's like, "Oh yeah, Bob just like he just didn't like the music, so he turned it down. It was annoying and loud. Like we always called it the hallelujah music, the screaming hallelujah music." But yeah, so there's that. Next thing is when I was in the Navy, I would work in the CIC, which is kind of like the central combat control area in the ship. One of the pieces of equipment I had basically a thermal camera on it. And so I would, even though that wasn't my primary job, whenever we were out at sea, like, and I was on watch, I'd be in there on the thermal camera scanning around. Well, I mean, it was daylight and thermal. This just happened to be nighttime, so I was using the thermal. And I'd be scanning around looking for any ships that, just in case the radar didn't catch something or our lookouts didn't catch something, whatever. We had a surface search radar, which whenever it was foggy out, you'd always see what, like if you imagine what clouds look like in the sky, that's what the radar looked like on the ground. It wasn't a solid wall of anything. It looked like clouds on the ground, or like on the radar looked like clouds whenever it was foggy on the surface of the ocean. And so we're going along at the middle of the night somewhere in the Pacific. We're either transiting towards or away from Asia like we would have been on an deployment towards the Middle East probably. And I was stationed in Oahu in Pearl Harbor. So we would have been going somewhere between the Philippines and Oahu, somewhere in the middle of the ocean there. It's the middle of the night. It's foggy, so the surface search radar looks like clouds, basically. When we're in the part of the ocean where there's no ships around, we haven't seen ships in a day or two, no boats, no nothing. Out of nowhere, and I'm looking around uselessly in the fog because you can only see so far in the fog, even with the thermal. Out of nowhere, the surface search radar all of a sudden like buzzes into like, and it was green, the color of the sweep, basically into green snow, almost like the way the old TVs would have that snow when you were on nothing, that shh thing. So the whole radar screen all of a sudden does that. Never saw it do that before. Within a minute or so of the radar screen snowing out like that, bobbing through the fog, I catch a normal, not a ship, but like a normal person boat, like probably fishing boat or person like pleasure craft or something like that, just bobbing lifelessly, like not underway, not under power, just like bobbing through the waves and the swells, comes out of the fog and starts drifting alongside the ship. And I look at it like, what the hell is this? And it's dead in the water, and it's the middle of the night, and we're not close to anything. So like I radio up to like the people in charge, like, you guys seen this? And I don't remember. I think they could see it when it got very, very close to us. Maybe, I don't remember. But I asked them if, like, should we check it out? Like, if there could be someone on board, and they didn't want to check it out. They didn't want to go. They didn't want to stop the boat. We had a place to be, and they didn't want to go see if anyone needed help, which made me a little sad, but I wasn't the one in charge. And so just watch this thing dead in the water, bobbing along, and track it all the way down the side of the ship, like probably within a few hundred feet of us. And as soon as it disappears behind us in the fog again, like within 30 seconds of it disappearing into the fog, suddenly the radar's working again. And so I've always joked around that was a ghost boat. We basically somehow went into some electronic fog, which screwed with our radar. Never saw that before or since. And then we had a little ghost boat.
And this, essentially, I guess it would be turned to malfunction, right? I mean, what else would you probably call it, especially around people that you are around, right? So was that something that needed to be reported as far as this malfunction, maybe to check the equipment?
If it had kept doing that, probably, but since it started working again in, 5 minutes, like it was 5 minutes of that and then it was working again, I'm sure they probably dinked around with it a little bit. It wasn't my radar. I'm sure they dinked around with it a little bit, but it started working again and it was fine.
Mm.
And so they didn't really, it wouldn't, once since it worked again, they wouldn't really worry about it. And it didn't happen again.
Do you think that it was the fact that you were pressed for time, or the fact that the decision was made to keep going because maybe more people actually, even without seeing this electronic fog thing going on with the radar, they maybe had this inclination something really wasn't right and that you shouldn't stop?
I don't know for sure because that decision would have been made up on the bridge and I was down in combat. The bridge is up in the top. I'm somewhere in the middle of the ship. And so that would have been made, that decision would have been made in a different room. And it was the middle of the night, so likely the captain would be asleep and whoever was in charge up on the bridge would have had to make the decision, do I want to wake the captain over this or not?
Mm.
And so it could have been that they were freaked out by it. It could have been, I don't believe they woke the captain, but I don't remember for sure. It could have been they were freaked out, or it could have just been like, we have places to be, we don't have time to stop for this.
Right.
And maybe it's just some derelict boat that got loose during a road wave somewhere. And yeah.
Was there
So who knows?
any whispers of this the next day amongst those of you guys that were up and experienced this?
No, not really. I mean, there's only the few of us who were up in the room where we would have seen this and happen. And no, we didn't. I mean, every great once in a while, like we might mention it, but nothing. Yeah, not really. So that's that. So the next thing was a weird one. I would call this a sleep paralysis adjacent event. So it started off, my mom was just recently got married again. And this was after I'm out of the Navy. So this is my mid 20s, probably. These next couple stories are probably right around like 2011, 2012, because I got out of the Navy in 2011. So my mom had just recently got married and she was living up in the mountains somewhere. And then like half an hour away was the house of the guy who she married, like the guy who she's married to now. So the house that she had before she married him was like, they hadn't sold it yet. So it was there and empty. Me and my siblings, like, while I was still figuring out the college situation after I got out, we would stay there sometimes. But for whatever reason, this night I was alone in the house. It was just me. And since none of my siblings were there and I didn't have my own room or my own bed or anything, instead of sleeping on the couch like I would when everyone was there, I went into my mom's room and I slept in my mom's room, like in her bed, since no one was home. And so I go to bed. So again, my mom is with her husband like half an hour away, and then one of my sisters is with one of her friends out towards the Mojave Desert, like an hour or so away in a different direction. And so I go to bed in there and I have this nightmare. And it's kind of like silly, cheesy horror movie nightmare type thing where I'm in a cornfield. There's something in the cornfield with me zipping through the cornfield in different directions surrounding me at like inhuman speed, like faster than a person can move. You just hear all the dry corn stalk just like as whatever, so run this way, run a different way, whatever. There's something bad, and I am in some clearing in the middle of the cornfield. I don't remember, there's a vehicle there or something, like maybe some old vehicle I'm standing by. But basically, whatever this thing is running around the cornfield being a creep shows up in the clearing next to me, and it's my sister. And she is possessed in this dream. Like, she starts saying all this crazy stuff like, I'm gonna kill the family and whatever, and she's gonna be the one to blame for it, and just saying all these evil, bad things that she's gonna like destroy all this and all these things. And so you would think, okay, weird, whatever, nightmare. So I wake up from this nightmare. This is probably, it's got to be right around 4 in the morning. I wake up from this nightmare, and at this time, because I just got out of the Navy, I still always slept with the covers all the way over my head, because down in the berthings, you get like 100 people and you're in very narrow areas and people turn on lights and stuff. And so to keep the light on my face, I hate sleeping with lights on. I would sleep with, in the Navy, I'd sleep with the blanket pulled up over my head so that when people would turn on the lights, it wouldn't wake me up because that was annoying. So I don't do that anymore, but at this time I was still sleeping with the blanket over my head. I wake up from the nightmare. Immediately, as I'm waking up, I feel that there is something in the room with me. It's just like, it's the strongest feeling of evil and hate and menace, and just like something hates me and wants to hurt me and wants to kill me, and it just hates me. It's like, this is like this palpable feeling just in the atmosphere. And I've never felt this before or after. And it's just like, just this oppressive, almost physical feeling in the room. And what, like, it's so oppressive and so strong that even though I'm laying there underneath the covers, I can tell that it's up in the air above me off the one corner. Like, I can pinpoint the location of where this feeling is emanating from. The first thing that goes through my mind, and again, this is before I know what sleep paralysis is, but the first thing that goes through my mind is all my mom's stories of being pinned down by something when she was a kid. And I'm like, ah, crap. This has never happened to me before. I do not want this to happen to me. This sounds terrible. And so I'm laying there and I'm like on my side, because I'm a side sleeper, under the blankets. And I'm like, okay, first things first, can I move? But if I can move, I don't want this thing to know I can move, because if it knows I can move, maybe it's going to jump on me. And so I do like Kill Bill, wiggle your big toe type thing. And I like kind of move one of my toes a little bit and I can move it. And so I like kind of just like, okay, I'm just going to scoot my foot like a centimeter just to make sure I'm not paralyzed. And I wasn't. I like very slowly and cautiously kind of like shifted just like my foot like a centimeter, because I felt like I should. The palpable physical presence of whatever this was like exerting almost, I guess you could describe it as a psychic pressure. I don't exactly know what that would feel like, except in this case, that's the only thing I could guess that it would be. It was exerting such a psychic pressure on me without actually touching me that I felt like I should be paralyzed. I shouldn't be able to move, but I could. So I like kind of moved my foot just a little bit just to be sure that I could, which gave me a sigh of relief because, oh, thank God I'm not paralyzed. So whatever this is doesn't have me completely immobilized, but I'm not going to move anymore because I'm convinced if I move anymore, this thing's going to effing jump on me the way that they would torture my mom when she was a young girl. And so I'm sitting there thinking for a second, and I start just getting this, and I start praying, and I start getting this overwhelming just feeling that even though this thing is here in the room with me, and it's all this hate and anger and rage is just being like thrown at me in such this physical way, somehow I know that even though this is with me, a lot of those feelings are really focused on my sister, who's like an hour and a half away and with her friend. Somehow, this sister that I just had this nightmare about, that seems like a normal nightmare. Somehow I know that all this rage and anger and everything, even though it does feel that towards me, is more focused somehow on her. And somehow this thing wants me to know that it is threatening her, that it's almost like it's here to tell me that she belongs to it, and it's going to get her, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I have no way of explaining why I know this or how I know this, but this is just like somehow I just know this while this is happening. And so I start praying, and this feeling of danger and threat towards my sister is so strong, even though this thing's in the room with me, that instead of praying for myself, I start praying for my sister. And I'm just laying there, holding still, not moving an ounce, praying for like a good solid half an hour, just like doing all the stuff I was raised to do, which is like, oh, you bind it up in Jesus' name, all the things the way I was raised to do it. Again, I'm more open-minded with things now. I think there's more to it than just Christianity, but this is how my mindset at the time. So I do all the things that I was raised to do, like and I'm saying all these prayers in my head. I'm not saying it out loud. I'm like, I'll bind this up in Jesus' name, all these different things, and like praying for protection over my sister and this and that. And after what feels like a solid 30 to 45 minutes, this presence melts away over the course of about 30 seconds. It's like it's there solid all the way for a good 30, 45 minutes. And then over a 30-second time frame, it just melts away and all of a sudden the room feels empty. And I cautiously pull the covers down from my head and look around and it feels perfectly fine in the room. I'm like, what the hell? So I like get on my iPhone and I go on like Pandora or Spotify or something like that. And I toss on some of my mom's old Jesus music just to like have some religious something going on in the room. So whatever this is, hopefully doesn't come back. And I'm laying there, and at this point, it's 4:30, 4:45 in the morning. My mom always has trouble sleeping. I kind of shoot her a text, "Are you awake?" And she like immediately within a second, I started like, "Yeah, I'm up. I'm downstairs, like in the house that she was in, so that I don't wake up Rich, which is her husband now." And so I'm like, "Oh, you're downstairs?" She's like, "Yeah, so I can call you?" She's like, "Yeah." So I call her and I tell her what happened. And she's like, well, that's so weird. Like, she's freaked out because she, of course, like, her mind always goes to, like, demons and the devil. So she's fully on board that this was a demon. With me, all I know is that's something evil. That beyond that, I can't put a label on it besides evil. But she says, this is so weird. I just, right before you texted me, I got a text from Amanda, which is my sister, when I was talking about, because her and her friend can't sleep because they've been freaked out all night, just feeling freaked out, like something, just something, not like what I experienced, but again, hour and a half away, they couldn't sleep because just something was freaking them out in the house and they couldn't explain what it was, but they were too freaked out to sleep. And they had sent her a text saying, we don't know what's going on. We're too freaked out to sleep. And then within minutes after that, I text my mom asking if she's awake because I just had this experience. So, and she was awake on her own before they texted her just because she has sleep issues and also like she just felt something was off. So you have these three groups of people, me, my mom, and then my sister and her friend, in three different houses in three different towns, all awake at the same time, feeling that something is off. And of course, it's just mine was the most extreme of all those experiences, but it was just a weird cross communication experience. And I say sleep paralysis adjacent because I wasn't paralyzed. I could move. And I just was careful not to show I could move in case whatever this was decided to jump on me. But yeah, and later my mom told me that she's always had like weird dreams and different things where something acts like it wants to get that particular sister and all sorts of issues. Yeah, so that's that.
Yeah, that's a hell of a lot of corroboration right there. How old was Amanda at the time of this incident?
So this would have been again 2011 or 12, or no, this had to be 2011 because they still had the house. So she would have been right around 21. Yeah, she would have been right around 21.
But what about when she was home? I mean, she didn't have any experiences with feeling, touched or watched or shadows or anything when she was home in that place?
I don't believe she's never told me anything like that. Our youngest brother, like the one who shares dad with her, like the one who came after her, he has had all sorts of like sleep paralysis type stuff. He's never told me about it. He's told other family members and they've told me. So I know he's had all sorts of weird things like that, but I don't know the details. I have never been told about my sister having a full-on paralysis type thing, but she has experienced tons of really dark, bad, like I said, my family experiences stuff and I'm the least of it, believe it or not. And so my family experiences all sorts of weird stuff. So she's experienced all sorts of weird, darker things, especially when she would visit her dad's house. So after my mom divorced her dad, they'd go over there for visitation and stuff. And I think a lot of the bad stuff that would happen, like a lot of the paralysis bad stuff that would happen to my brother, I believe was there. And like they had just weird experiences and stuff there. But yeah, they would have dark things, but I don't fully know all the details about it. Like they would have to tell you that.
Okay. So because I was going to say, oh, lucky you, you're the one that had to deal with that thing. But it sounds like, in fact, Amanda has stories of her own, more than likely. That has to do with that, whatever the hell that is.
Yeah, I have probably the least amount of personal experiences of everyone in my family.
Wow.
As weird as this seems. We're not crazy. I mean, I'm a scientist working in healthcare. Like,
Oh, I don't
yeah.
think you're crazy. Come on now, you listen to this show. You know what's
No,
up.
I know. I'm saying for other people.
Yeah.
Like,
Hey, if they're
yeah,
listening
yeah. No, I know.
and they don't
Yeah.
believe in any of this stuff, then they're crazier than anybody I've ever talked to on the show. I'll tell you that. And not that I think anybody's
Well, thank
crazy.
you
I'm
for
just saying,
listening.
if their opinion is we're crazy, then yo crazy for listening. Because if you don't believe in this, then I don't know what to tell you.
If they don't believe in this, then they have like some sort of weird anger issues where they're like, "Oh, what are these people talking
Yeah,
about?"
it's like
This,
masochistic almost, right? You're like, oh, I
uh-huh,
hate these
uh-huh.
nutty people talking about this stuff, but I keep listening. It's
Well,
just
they
like
make me so
Howard
mad I
Stern.
have to listen.
Yeah, it's just like Howard Stern. He's like, who listens more? The people that hate me. Well, there you go.
So next, so my mom's third husband, he had two kids, a son and a daughter, and the daughter, even though legally she is no longer anything to us because they divorced, I've known her since she was 8 years old. So she will always be my little sister, like always, forever and ever. I love her. She's my sister. And so when I got out of the Navy, so this would have been towards the end of 2011 into early 2012 because I went to college in Santa Barbara, like my first college, because I did college and then I did university somewhere else later. So I went to community college in Santa Barbara, California. When I was heading out there, like I was fresh out of the Navy and I did my little trip to Europe that I took myself on as a reward for that. And I came home and I'm like, I'm going to Santa Barbara for school. Does anyone want to come with me? So I'm not by myself in this town where I don't know anyone. And so this sister piped up and said, yeah, let's do it. And so me and her moved to Isla Vista, which is this little insane, like thousands and thousands of college kids live in this 1 square mile party town, insane and silent place. It's crazy. But so she moves into this place with me there. We can only afford a 1 bedroom place, but thankfully the room is large enough to where we basically stick our beds. Like I think I have a full size bed and she has a queen size bed, and we basically stuck them in the room side by side. So her bed was like 2.5 feet away from mine, and we kind of just had this unspoken agreement there where if anyone was going to meet up with someone of the opposite sex, make sure the other person is out of town type deal. And so we had this place together and she experienced a lot of weird stuff there. One time we were home, it was late at night, and it's just her and I there. None of her friends were over. There's no drinking partying that night or anything. And she's on her bed to the right of mine, and she's on her phone, texting or doing Instagram or whatever it is she would do. She was on her phone a lot, and it was dark and late. And so it was dark in the room. There was maybe a tiny bit of light coming in through the window behind our beds, but not enough to see much except for maybe a few shadows. And so through the light of her phone, she could kind of see me off to the side of her just a little bit in a little bit of the room, but mostly she was blinded by her phone, right? And so from her perspective, or from my perspective, I'll say first. So I'm on my bed and I'm kind of laying on my belly. I'm not going to sleep yet because I don't sleep on my belly, but I'm like laying on my belly thinking, and I think I start saying like a prayer for the night or whatever. And I'm laying there kind of saying like my prayers. And as I'm saying my prayers, I hear my sister a couple of feet away from me saying something along the lines of, Randy, what the F are you doing? Freaking me out. And I look over at her. I'm like, what? And when I say what, she like loses her shit, screams and like jumps up and like freaks out. I'm like, what the heck is going on? How, or like, what's going on? And she's like, what? And like, it takes me a little bit to calm her down. Eventually, I calm her down enough for her to tell me what happened from her perspective. So, from her perspective, she can see me in her peripheral vision laying on my bed, face down. And at some point, she sees me kind of get up on my hands and knees, sigh, like an audible, like, and then kind of crawl back out of my bed, kind of like a backwards crawl out of my bed type thing, just going to, because we don't normally get out of our bed in the middle because our beds are so damn close together. It's annoying to go there. So we go out towards the bottom of our beds. And so I crawl at the bottom of my bed, and she says, and then I go and I stand in. So right on the far side of my bed is the door that goes out to the living room, and it's one of those sliding doors, and there's a bunch of cabinets right there too. So I get out of my bed and I go over there to that dark corner by the door, like I'm going to go out of the room, but I don't go anywhere. I just stay there and I stand in the corner, and I stand in the corner and I don't move. And she's getting annoyed because she thinks I'm trying to F with her and like scare her or something like that. Because sometimes we play pranks. So being all annoyed, she asked me what the hell I'm doing. And at this point, her phone's down and she's looking at what she thinks is me in the corner of the room. And she's like, what are you doing? And when I answer her from just a tiny bit to her left, she loses her shit because that's not where I was in her mind. And so I answer her, she screams and looks at me. I'm where I'm supposed to, where I know I am, and looks back to the corner, and the me that she thought was there is no longer there. It's just an empty space.
Mm.
And so basically, while I was in the room right next to her, it's as if a doppelganger of myself that I didn't see somehow made me basically invisible and crawled out of my bed and stood in the corner like a creep to freak her out until she flipped out, and then it was gone, and it was just she could see me in my bed again.
It even got out of bed the way that you would get out of bed.
Yeah, exactly. Like I rose up, like, because again, like I was on my belly at this time, and so it kind of like pushed up, like almost like a push up, got on my hands and knees like you would think, and then kind of like
Yeah.
shuffled backwards out of bed, and she said when I first got up on my hands and knees, I sighed like, and then like I didn't want to do something, or like maybe I had to go get a drink of water, and I didn't feel like getting out of bed because I was being lazy. Who knows? But get up on my hands and knees, sigh, crawl backwards out of the bed, and go over like I'm going to leave the room, but just stand like a creep in the shadows of the corner of the room until she freaks out.
Oh, that is creepy.
Yeah, it's like what the hell? So yeah, there's that. A couple other things. So that's the only thing that. So there was that. Also in that place, like I would very almost nightly feel like when I was trying to go to sleep, feel the feeling of thinking that something had sat on the end of my bed or sat near my legs. There's just like, that sinking feeling on the bed when someone sits down. Like I would feel that sometimes. And I would always wonder, like, am I imagining that because I'm drifting off to sleep? Or is there something really weird going on? And it would annoy me sometimes and sometimes freak me out a little bit, but I would ignore it and I'd eventually go to sleep. That's kind of the only place that happened frequently. It's happened off and on in different places, but that was the only like place where that consistently happened all the time. And then when I left that place, it's become an extremely rare thing. And so that kind of leads me to believe that maybe I really was feeling something sit on the bed or whatever, which is weird. So there's that. And one time when my sister was going through that exact door between the living room and our bedroom, she was on the other side. She was in the living room. I think it was during the day. And again, that door was one of those ones that slides sideways into the wall instead of opening on a swing, on a hinge. It slides into the wall on a track. And so one time she went to go into the bedroom from the living room, and as she opens that door, something invisible screamed in her face. I didn't hear this, and she flipped out, but something shouted in her face really loud. And then another time she was in there, and like in the room was also the bathroom, the large bathroom sink with a large mirror. And so she'd always been in there doing her makeup and stuff for like 2 hours. And she one time was in the mirror doing her makeup, and I always had a book around somewhere. And she said I had one of my novels was sitting on my bed, closed, and in the mirror, she watched the novel flip itself up and over from one cover to the next, from one side to the other side of the book, just flip itself on the bed while she was watching, doing her makeup, and that freaked her out. So she had a lot more weird stuff happen in there than I ever did. I just had the thing sitting on the bed, and then I didn't even experience the thing that she thought was me. She experienced that. So it was all
Right.
pretty much her experiences. But yeah, all sorts of weird stuff in that house.
Did either of you ever separately or together, maybe you wouldn't know if it was separately, but did either of you ever say out loud, who might you be? What do you want? Anything like that?
I never did. Like, I probably said a few prayers here and there just to like make anything bad leave. But I mean, that doesn't always work. Like, I mean, I've heard enough stories to know that praying that something will go away doesn't always work the
Yeah.
way some people think it does.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if she ever did anything like that. We had a few other fallen or like funny coincidences, but nothing paranormal besides those, of course. So the next thing is a big story for me. So I think I sent you a, did I send you this? Yeah, the screenshot that says like glitch in the matrix.
Yes.
And so that screenshot I sent you is of Google Maps. And that's a mall in, where was this? This was Bakersfield, California. So that's like the big mall in Bakersfield. And that is a Macy's, the big square building. I think you can even see the Macy's sign, right? And so this again would have been 2011, 2012. I'm thinking 12. I'm not 100% on that. And my mom and her husband, they're living up in their house up in the mountains up above Bakersfield, up in the Tehachapi Mountains. And I was home from college for either Christmas or Thanksgiving, one of the two. And I'm one of those people who absolutely hates shopping holidays. Like I can't stand Black Friday or like the day after Christmas, like going in person to stores because I do not like shopping to begin with. And I especially don't like shopping with all the crazy crowds of people pepper spraying each other and stomping each other and doing all the crazy things they do. It's not my game. But it would have either been Black Friday or the day after Christmas. I believe it was the day after Christmas. My mom wanted to drive the 40 minutes down the mountain to the mall in Bakers to the Macy's because there was something that she wanted to get. And I was like, there was no one else around to go with her. And she's like, oh, come with me, Randy, come with me, come with me. And I was like, I hate this shit. I don't want to do that. And she's like, we're not just going shopping. I know exactly what I want. I know where it is. I promise we will be in and out of there quick, but it's for so much money off. I have to do it. Won't be in there for any longer than like 15, 30 minutes. I promise. I'm like, yeah, fine, whatever. And so we drive down into town with her. And so where the green dot is on that screenshot that I sent you, we're looking for parking and we luck out. Because again, this is a shopping holiday. And right where that green dot is an open parking spot right there in front of those doors. And what makes this so memorable and so funny is there is somebody's van decked out with fur and dog ears like the Dumb and Dumber van.
Oh, wow.
And it's like hilarious. And like, who has a van? Like, who did this? Who would make one of these in real life? And we park in the empty parking space right next to the front doors, right next to this dog van. And we're making all sorts of Dumb and Dumber jokes and like laughing about it. And we get out of the car. My mom starts petting the car and stuff, like petting the van, petting the fur and stuff, making all these jokes. I think I may have pet it. I don't remember. When we make all these jokes, we run in the door that's right there. And true to her word, my mom knows exactly what she wants and she finds it in like less than 3 or 4 minutes inside the doors. And we go stand in the line for like 15 or so minutes. And we are out of that door in 20 minutes. The fastest thing like that I've ever seen when it comes to one of those stupid shopping holidays. And so we walk out the doors and we walk right back up to the funny ass dog van that is still sitting there. And we walked just past it because we were on the far side of the dog van. We walked just past it and our car's not there. There's another car in our spot. And you don't forget that you parked next to the van like that. I'm like, oh no, where is the car? Why is the car not here? Right? And so we start looking around. We know that there's no way we didn't park next to this van, but we're doing our due diligence. And so just in case we're crazy, we start walking all up and down this extremely packed parking lot with lines of cars in every single aisle fighting for parking spots because there's so many effing people there. And we're looking and we're looking and we're looking and we go up and down every single aisle, clicking the alarm thing on her phone or on her keys, on her key fob, just trying to set off the alarm or make it honk or whatever. And we go up and down every single aisle, probably 5 or 6 times at least. And we call her husband, who's working like half an hour, 40 minutes away at his job. We think someone stole the car. we need you to come get us. We're going to call the cops. We think someone stole the car, and he's in a meeting and he can't come right away. And so he's like, I'll be there within an hour. I can't come right now, but I'll be there within an hour. Right. And so we're sitting there, we're kind of pissed off. We're like, we gotta call the cops. We don't want to deal with this. And we're like, oh, let's just look again. Even though we've looked half a dozen times. We look again, we go through, and we're about to make the phone call to the cops. And I'm like, you know what? Just for shits and giggles, if you look there in the photo, there's another parking lot to the right, and there's kind of like a street in between them. Like it's one of the mall streets, so it's not like a full-on city street, but it's still a busy-ass street because it's a mall during the shopping holiday. Like, let's just cross the street here and go walk around this other parking lot just to see what we see. Just because we're delaying calling the cops. We don't want to deal with it. And so we start up by the Macy's building in this next parking lot, and we walk up and down every single aisle, and we get to the very bottom corner of that far parking lot where the red dot is, and there's our car. And they're like, okay, we found the car. Let's see what happened. We were expecting broken windows, an unlocked car, shit missing, whatever. We go up to the car. Car is still locked. There's no broken windows. There's nothing missing, nothing rearranged, nothing touched. The car is just sitting there happily, like it should have been parked there, locked, sitting in that spot and parked back of the lot, relatively far away from where that green dot is, if you see where that is.
Yeah, it's a hell and gone from the green dot.
Yeah, nowhere near it. And you're not going to mistake being parked right next to the front doors, next to a freaking Dumb and Dumber van.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you make that mistake. But the car was there, and it was locked and unopened and untouched.
I don't even know where to start with that one.
So we start coming up with all these scenarios, and we're like, what could have happened? So we start making jokes about somehow mistakenly going through portal to an alternate universe. We joke to this day that this is not our universe, that we're from a parallel universe, and somehow we parked next to that dog van, and we drove through a wormhole or something without realizing it. Or my mom jokes that it's the dog van itself was really not really a dog van and it transported us, but basically we make a joke that something about us going there transported us to some parallel universe, and we're in a different universe that's not ours. And we are 95% joking about this, but 5% not. To the point where we even started, like, she even called her husband and started like grilling him to see if there's any personality changes or anything. And like, yeah. we make jokes about this all the time, and no one believes us. And they're like, oh, you just mistook where you parked. Like, no, we effing did not mistake where we parked when we were parked next to that van by those doors. And we found the car all the way over here. And so we always joke about somehow we went through a wormhole when we parked the car, and when we came back out in this other universe, the car was parked over there. We joke about how, well, we can't go back now because, like, I met my wife and had my son in this world, so I'm sure as hell not going back. And she likes things how it is, so we're not going anywhere. You guys are stuck with us here in this world. We make these jokes all the damn time. And no one believes us to think we're full of shit or that we're mistaken, but that's okay.
So basically, if you see the Dumb and Dumber van again, which, by the way, if I saw that, it would make my decade. That's one of my top 3 favorite movies, because that's just the idiot that I am, I guess. But I mean, if you saw this van again, you'd probably drive away like, nope, not parking here, go somewhere else.
My mom always says if she sees a dog van, run as fast as you can in the opposite direction. Like, she always says that. So the only halfway legitimate scenario that I can come up with that is also so absolutely unlikely, but I guess somewhat possible, is somehow somebody else had the exact same make and model of, like, a limited edition, whatever fancy ass hybrid car that she had. I mean, it was a Camry, but it was like some fancy limited edition version of the Camry, because my mom's husband now, like, he's got money, so she's a little bit bougie now. That's okay. But she had this limited edition hybrid Camry with all this limited edition whatever interior and all this. Somehow someone had the same car and with the same color, and also somehow had their alarm key fob sent to the same alarm codes, and was in the exact same spot at the exact same time, and walked out to that spot and thought it was their car and got in it and drove it and then looked around and said, oh shit, this isn't my stuff, and then parked it somewhere random and walked away. That is the closest thing to a legitimate scenario, non-paranormal scenario that I can think of that would make that possible. And if that's true, that's effing unlikely. Like that's insanely unlikely. But whatever. So our joke is we're in a parallel universe now and y'all are stuck with us. So there's that.
Oh, and the other side, besides the Dumb and Dumber van, which how in the actual hell could you ever forget you parked next to something like that, especially your mom's like petting it. That's what I'd be. I'd be hugging it. I'd be just elated. But you
had years. That freaking had years.
That's amazing. And kudos to whoever did that. I'm sure there's probably a few of them out there somewhere. I would just love to see that one of these days. But I'd probably make an offer on it. Not only the van, but seeing as, because I'm looking at the picture right now, seeing as it was a holiday, I bet that whole left side right in front of the actual Macy's building was packed full. I mean, your people are fighting over spots probably, and the fact that you scored one that closely to the front entrance is also memorable. So I don't know. So but that goes for your theory as well. This other person should have realized if they did have this key fob with the same code, which that is the most likely scenario, how could they not remember? And just say the van was gone. Just say the crazy Dumb and Dumber van was gone. How would they not remember that they scored such a close parking spot and still get into that damn car?
Like, oh yeah, we parked in the boonies, but here's our car right here in a different parking lot. That makes sense.
Yeah, unless they were in the same aisle, a few cars down. I don't know, but that's a crazy story.
Yeah. Either way, it's crazy. But I like our paranormal version better. It's more fun.
Heck yeah, it is. We're gonna stick with that one.
And it's almost just as likely. Like maybe not quite, but it's almost there. Like if one is like 98% impossible, this one's only 99% impossible. They're pretty damn close to impossible to each other, I think. So, okay. So that's our glitch in the Matrix story. And it's also funny because that's right around 2012, which is when people joke about all of the Mandela effects stuff happening, right?
Yes.
So people joke that's around the origin of that. Next thing, I don't know how I feel about, I didn't used to believe in past life stuff at all. I'm a little bit more open-minded now, and now all I will say is I don't effing know, because who knows? No one knows, right? And so I was, again, this would have been right around the same time. So it had to be before 2013, because it was before I met my wife. And so again, it had to probably be 2012. And we were up, and I was up again visiting my parents up in the house in Tehachapi up above Bakersfield, up in the mountains. And they kind of had like, I don't know if you call it split level, but it was like a 3-level house, but it wasn't 3 full stories. It's like one half of the house was 2 stories and the other half was 1 story, and they kind of like were wonky towards each other. So you kind of went as a zigzag back up, but it was only 2-story tall house, but it had 3 stories built in somehow. I'm not good at explaining that. Anyways, so I'm sleeping on the couch. I'm visiting them. I take the couch in that bottom den area is where I'm going to sleep for the night. Go to bed. And I have the most insanely realistic dream I've ever had in my entire life. In this dream, I am, from what I can tell, I am some sort of indigenous person. I feel like I'm almost like I'm in the same place, almost as if this happened in the same mountains, but probably didn't. And I'm in this indigenous person, and I am drugged. I am drugged with something. I'm on some sort of narcotic, so I'm kind of feeling loopy. That feeling like when you're coming out of dental work, if they had to put you under or something like that, kind of narcotic, druggy, kind of zoned out feeling. Right? And so I feel like I'm under the influence of something like that. I'm kind of drugged a little bit out of my mind, a little bit, just very, very passive. And this man who appears to be some sort of like Catholic clergy member walks up to me and he says, "It's time." I kind of mumble like, "It's time for what?" And he said, It's time for your execution. It's happening now. It's time." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like very like zoned out during this, like they've drugged me with something, right? I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, what, why am I being executed again? And he tells me, I don't remember what he said, but he tells me, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Right. And so he's walking me through what is presumably the village or settlement or whatever, wherever we are. And he brings me up as we're walking along. He's like, you should say a prayer to Saint whatever. And I don't know who that saint is, and I ask him who they are. And he tells me what they're the saint of. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds good. And so who knows? I don't think I actually mumble any type of prayer because I'm too zoned out. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good idea because I'm just so drugged, right? And he brings me up to this rise, kind of almost like this prominent spot above the village or settlement or wherever, to where I'm going to be in view, like almost like a natural platform, a hilltop or a rise or something where everyone can see me. And I know that even though I can't focus enough to see them, I know that there is a large crowd gathered around us observing what is happening. I asked the guy how they're going to do it, and he said, well, we're going to kill you with and he uses an indigenous word that I don't remember what it was, but in the dream, I know what it is, and I know that it translates to the wolf maul, and it is a very large femur club of some large animal, and we call it the wolf maul. We're up on the rise, and he says whatever he says. I'm feeling kind of zoned out to it. All the light looks very like almost liquidy and stuff, like just the way the light looks, and I can't very focus very well, but things like liquidy and And so he's like, okay, get down on your knees. And so I get down on my knees. He tells me to close my eyes, and he's holding me, gripping me with his left arm on my right shoulder. Like you have to imagine, like this dream feels so real. Like you could do this later with like your daughter or a friend or something like that. So you can feel this feeling. If you close your eyes and have someone tightly grip your right shoulder with their left hand, like tightly, and like with their whole body tense, raise something up above their head with their right hand, you can feel that muscle movement translated through their hand into your shoulder. Like there's a feeling there, there's a tactile sensation there of that motion that you can feel through your body. And I felt that. That's how realistic this was. Even though I was all drugged up, that's how just tactile and realistic this dream was. And I could feel that he's raising the thing up above us. He pauses for a moment with his arm above his head, and my eyes are closed, but I feel all this. And I feel his hand on my shoulder, the one that's tightly gripping me, start trembling as like an adrenaline rush takes over him, like that trembling adrenaline thing. I feel the adrenaline tremble run through his hand as he's holding me, as he pauses for that moment with the thing raised up over my head. And then I feel the contraction of his muscles again through his hand on my shoulder. I feel that contraction, that very quick contraction, as he starts swinging down, and then I fade off into the darkness. I fade off into the blackness. I don't feel anything. It's just a peaceful release. And I fade off into the darkness, and I'm on the couch again, and my parents downstairs, and I don't even open my eyes. I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, what? That's such a weird dream. I've never felt anything that realistic. Like, how does that dream feel so real? How did I feel all those things that I felt? How did I feel the gravel under my feet? Like, you don't feel things like that detailed when you dream. Like, you see things, but the touch sensation is not that detailed. Everything was just so hyper realistic. I'm like, what was that? It's almost like just past lives. I'm thinking about all this, just contemplating it, sitting there, just very comfortable, laying on the couch in the dark with my eyes closed. And as I'm thinking about it, suddenly the thought scatters across my brain, you're not awake yet. As soon as that thought flashes through my mind, it's like a cannon goes off and I rocket out of my body through the roof of the house into the open sky above the house and into the sky, like a good 50, 70 feet into the sky above the house. Scares the living poop out of me. And I'm like, ah, and that fear almost acts like a rubber band and snaps me back down into my body. I like slam back down into my body on the couch and I like sit up and jolt up like, what the hell? And the only thing I could think of is somehow after thinking that I've woken up from the most realistic dream I've ever had before since in my life, somehow I didn't fully wake up, and in that like half awake, half sleep, kind of liminal whatever moment, when I realized that I wasn't 100% awake, I somehow had the only time this has ever happened to me, like an accidental out of body experience type thing, like the people who do astral projection. I feel like I somehow accidentally astrally projected by mistake. And when I did that, whatever you want to call it, your spirit body or whatever that's called, because I don't know the lingo for that, just shot out of my body through the roof and the ceiling of the house and scared the living crap out of me. And that fear snapped me back into my body like a rubber band, just like whap. I don't know. It's weird. Like that's just another thing. The dream was weird because it was the most realistic thing before a sense. And then that weird out of body astral projection type thing was weird. And again, no way to explain that.
Yeah, that's a big whoopsie. And stuff like astral projection kind of freaks me out. I think I'm all set with that kind of stuff. So I definitely wouldn't want to do it accidentally, especially.
Yeah, I mean, you always hear like, and who knows if it's true or not. Like, if people can really astrally project, you hear the stories.
Don't go too far. Yeah.
Belief I was, where it's like, well, if you leave your body, what can go into your body while you're not there?
Right.
That's how I was raised to think about it, because my family is so weird and they think weird things are possible, but they're scared of it because everything's demons, you know? And so that's something that we had talked about in my house growing up. They're like, you don't ever want to mess with that because maybe it's real. And if it is, what could go into your body while you're not there? It's like you're leaving an empty house and something could move in while you're off doing whatever you're doing. And so that's something that always scared me. And so I would never want to try and accidentally do that either. So yeah, that scared the crap out of me. Okay, so coming to all the more recent stuff, one of the biggest, more recent things that happened was when my wife was pregnant with my son. So this would have been, so it had to have been, because he was born 2019. So this had to be late 2018, November of 2018. So there was like a month and a half period between when I graduated college and finished my postgraduate program for my science stuff and when I got my job in the town that I'm living now. And so there's like a month and a half between finishing, getting my national licenses and all that, and applying for jobs and getting accepted somewhere. And during that month and a half, we moved out of where we were living and moved in with my parents and stuck all our stuff in storage in the town that we knew we wanted to move to, and stuck our stuff in storage there until I found a job. And so we were living there. They have a guest room downstairs, down at the bottom of the staircase. And it's the only room that's downstairs. And then at the top of the stairs, there's 2 more rooms, an office, a bathroom. And then that's where the master bedroom is. And upstairs in their house is, and you've heard this one before, but upstairs in their house it's just, at nighttime, it's creepy upstairs. Not in their bedroom, but like down the hallway towards like where the office is and the bathroom and around the corner. It's just creepy upstairs at night. Everyone thinks so. All my siblings think so. My mom tries to deny it, but even she gets weirded out by it sometimes too. But downstairs it's normally fine. Normally. But my wife, while we were there, she was having a few issues. She had a couple of little sleep paralysis things happen in that little guest room that we were staying in. So there was something messing with us a little bit while we were in that house. In that guest room, the right attached to that guest room is the little bathroom, but the toilet is super loud and my wife is pregnant. So sometimes if I would wake up in the middle of the night needing to use the restroom, I would go up the stairs, down the creepy hallway to the restroom over there so that I could not wake her up with the loud toilet and all that because she needed her sleep. And so I have what I assume is a dream that one of my brother-in-laws thinks was some sort of other weird astral projection thingy. I don't know what to say about that. Then you heard Jake's thing. I'll bring that up later. But so what I remember is I wake up, and again, I'm assuming this is a dream. I wake up sometime in the middle of the night. let's say 3, but it could have been 4 or 2, who knows. I wake up in the middle of the night, wife is asleep, and I don't want to wake her up with the loud bathroom. So I go and I decide I'm going to go up the stairs and I'm going to go use the bathroom up there. So I go to the room. I don't really have a light or anything. I'm just using like my relatively good night vision, I guess. And so I start going up the stairs, and about halfway up the stairs, I just get this overwhelming feeling that there's something waiting for me at the top of the stairs. So for people who haven't heard this, for most people who haven't heard this story before, so the way at the top of the stairs, basically it's almost like a T setup where you go to the top of the stairs, you go to the right, it's my parents' room, you go to the left, there's like a hallway with a bathroom at the end and then the other office. And then if you hook a U-turn around the top of the stairs, like the base of the T goes back to another guest room in the laundry room. And so I'm going up these stairs, and about halfway up, I just get this overwhelming feeling that there's something waiting for me around that U-turn bend of this at the top of the stairs, and it's waiting for me and it wants to get me. And I'm like, what is, like, somehow I just know that this is there, and I know that it's scary and that I should be worried. And so I crouch down. Instead of turning around and going back downstairs, I decide that I'm going to get down on my hands and knees and kind of like bear crawl up the stairs and see if I can peek around that U-turn corner and see what is there. Because I'm convinced there's something there. And so I get down on my hands and knees and I go really, really slowly and quietly. And I get to the top of the stairs and I kind of pause and I just start to like turn my head around that bend in the stairs, and something grabs me. It's just something strong grabs me and starts trying to yank me around that corner. And the only thing that's keeping it from yanking me around the corner of the stairs is that this is like there's a wall between us. It's like a U-turn. So the lower half of my body is wrapped around this wall on the stairs, and he's trying to wrap me in a 180-degree turn around this thing. And so I'm kind of bracing my body against these stairs while this very strong thing is just yanking and pulling on me, trying to drag me around that corner. And I see this thing. The closest thing that it looks like is and I know that this is the creepypasta whatever image, but the closest thing that it looks like is the famous creepypasta image, stereotypical image of the rake and the security cam footage, right? And so it looks like that. It's like got this mottled, grayish, dead-looking, cold, clammy skin. It's humanoid shaped. As far as I know, it's roughly the size of a person, but it could be bigger because I can't see the whole thing. I can't see all the way to the back of it. But it's not standing up on its legs or even like crawling in a fully upright position. Its arms and legs are splayed out to the side of it like a lizard or a spider. And it's like that's its body position. Like legs and arms are kind of out to the side. Knees are out sideways. And it's like in a spider, lizard, whatever body conformation. And it's that low to the ground. And it just looks, I can't remember if I saw eyes or not. I feel like I did, but I don't remember for sure. And it's trying to rip me around that corner, and I don't know what it wants with me, but I do not want to go around that corner with this thing, right? And so it's trying to pull me. I'm struggling and fighting, and then I wake up in the bed downstairs to my wife shaking me, saying like, Randy, wake up. What's going on? You're fighting in your sleep. You're struggling. You're fighting. Like, and I don't do that in my sleep. I don't move around and fight things or I'm not a mover really in my sleep except for changing position here and there. And so it freaked her out, and she was already a little weirded out because she's had a couple little sleep paralysis things in this room. And so she's like, you were fighting in your sleep. What's going on? Oh God, I must have had a nightmare. Like I had this most horrible nightmare. This is so weird. Like, oh, that was horrible. That was terrible. I'm talking to my mom about it months or years later. I don't remember which now. And I tell her about it. She's like, oh, that's like the spider thing that I saw. I'm like, what? I told you when we first moved in there, because this is a different house. This is a different town. Like when we first moved in there, like when I was unpacking, I saw something. And I'm like, well, tell me again. I don't remember. Downstairs, there's the main living room area is 2 stories. It's a 2-story living room. And so when you go to the top of the stairs, then that T like off to the right that goes towards my parents' room, that's also a balcony overlooking the living room, and it goes all the way up to the top of the second story in the living room. It's called living room. Towards the back of the living room is a fireplace, is it brick or stone? I don't remember. But there's a fireplace there at the back of the living room that's kind of adjacent to where my pops' office would be down in the for that hallway to the right. And one day when they first moved in there, she was unpacking or doing something in the middle of the day. It was just her home. And she notices something watching her from the fireplace. And she looks over, and the best way that she can describe it is like maybe a third of the way up the fireplace, hanging on the wall of the fireplace like a bug on a wall, is a humanoid, blurred, almost like the Predator camouflage type thing. But it's not perfect clear. It's like a mottled dark shadow within that blur that she can make out a body shape, and it's like a humanoid thing hanging vertical on the wall like a spider with its head turned back watching her. And when she notices it and it sees that she caught its attention, or that it caught her attention, and it sees that she can see it, it like spider crawls super fast up the bricks or rocks of the fireplace and basically through the ceiling like it's not there. Like it just crawls up the fireplace through the ceiling. But it's that same like splayed out spider humanoid motion type thing. And this is something she saw, not asleep, not napping, not anything, just fully awake, unpacking the house when they first moved in. And there's been other instances of people seeing somewhat similar things, but it's not very clear, the stories. So this weird dream thing that I have is corroborated by a weird sighting that my mom had years beforehand when they first moved into the house, that I knew that she saw something, but I didn't know the details of the story. I didn't know that story fully. And she corroborated the story of the same thing that she had seen relatively, except with me, it wasn't cloaked. I could see the damn thing. It was just dark and shadowy and scary. But so there's that. And I'm like, how did I have this dream about the same thing that she saw a few years earlier? So one of my brother-in-laws is convinced that somehow I was astral projecting and walking up the stairs. And again, I don't do that I know of, except for that one accidental time. And then I was telling this story to you guys and a couple of the other patrons, and one of them, Jake, I believe, came up with this terrible idea that I was awake and I wasn't dreaming, and I did go up those stairs and something did grab me, and somehow I blacked out, and after whatever happened was said and done, almost like a UFO abduction experience, I was placed back in my bed and then started flipping out of my sleep, and my wife woke me up without knowing that something had placed me back in the bed.
Right.
And then someone else, I think it was you, also brought up like the story of the sheriff who saw like the shadow thing in the upper story of that house that he was investigating, and he blacked out and woke up in his patrol car and all the things that followed that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't like that idea at all. So I'm going to hope that I was asleep and it was just a weird crossover.
Yeah.
Spiritual dream.
Yeah, you were not happy. I think it was Jake that brought that up on that video chat, and you're like, no, I don't want to hear about that.
I don't like that.
Not having that, man.
It's usually one of the like tail crawler type things.
Oh.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
That was weird and creepy.
Yeah. I'd hate to blame it all on your grandma, but I mean, you guys have a lot of really dark, nasty things that have come in and out, and a lot of one-offs as well, which aren't always one-offs, because then it's something either you'll see in a dream, but your mom or your sister is actually seen, or vice versa. I just wonder how much what your grandma was dabbling in has followed all you guys all these years.
And as far as I know, it goes up past my grandma. Like, my grandma has mentioned before that somewhere up through her family line, they were like gypsies and people who dabbled with the weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it may be a long line of things.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there's anything worse than an old curse or spirit or hex or something, or just something gone awry, much like that gray cat that she sent to you to protect you. But in essence, it was terrorizing you when you were little. You hated that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't remember that cat as a dream. I remember that as a real memory. Like there's something that happened.
Right.
Like the shadow thing in the hallway, that I remember as a dream, but that cat, I remember that as memories. That's memories in my mind. It's weird.
See, and what went wrong there? You know, was it the tone of her? And I mean, I don't have no idea how this stuff works, and I of course, you don't. I don't expect you to. It's good that you don't, right? It's good that we don't know how to work these things, but that stuff does fascinate me enough to go, well, did she say the wrong word? Did she use the wrong tone? Like, how does that screw up? Because she was so upset that it was a scary thing and not a good thing.
Yeah. All right. So there's just a couple of things. We still have time?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So the last couple of things. So this one is a little bit more recent. So again, I have a toddler. He's 3 now, but just before he turned 2, like a little bit before he turned 2, is the house that we have now. It's the house I'm in right now. He started having this issue that some people will want to write off as night terrors, but it's not night terrors because he was never asleep. So, in in our bedroom, his bed is in the bedroom with us because we're in a very small place and we don't have a lot of room. So his bed is in the bedroom with us, in our bedroom, and it started again right before a little bit before he turned 2, where we started having this issue where he would be awake. We'd be in the room. We'd be getting him ready for bed. It would always happen at night, but he wasn't asleep. The lights weren't off. It wasn't dark in the room. He wasn't laying down. The lights would be on and we'd be laughing and playing and reading stories and changing him, getting him ready for bed, changing his diaper, doing all the nighttime things before we get him in bed. And at some point in the middle of all that happy, awake, laughing process, a switch would flip and he would lose his poo because he saw something scary in the corner of the room and just like lose his crap and be trembling, shaking. He was so scared by it. Right? What the heck is going on? And this happened over and over and over again. And then sometimes it would happen after we would lay him down and turn off the lights, but it'd be like right when we turn off the lights before he's not asleep. He'll be talking to us. And then just lose his prop. And it was always the same corner of the room. We started trying to figure this out. Is this pareidolia? What is he seeing something in the shapes of objects that are in that particular corner of the room? And so we start rearranging things. We move boxes to a different corner or put different things there. We move things around so that whatever he thinks he sees in that corner, that shape can't be there anymore because we've moved things, right? And it does not work. Whatever this is just keeps torturing him multiple times a week. And again, it's not night terrors because he's awake and happy and laughing and smiling in the switch flips, right? And so, I mean, we're concerned parents are like, what the heck is going on? What do we do? And so we try saying prayers and prayers aren't seeming to work. And at one point, near the beginning of when it happened, after he was asleep and peacefully and stuff, just to do it, I went to that particular corner of the room and I just addressed the darkness, I guess, because the light was off because he was asleep. And I verbally out loud, just you need to leave him alone. Talking to the air, basically. You need to leave him alone. I don't know what you are, but if you're scaring him, you are not welcome. If there was something peaceful here, I wouldn't care. It's fine. Keep its peace. But you are scaring him. You are being mean. So whatever you are, you need to leave. This is our house. I say the things and I say that. And all of a sudden, if you've ever been in a fight, at least your first fight or two, there's that weird kind of butterflies in your stomach, adrenaline feeling right before you fight, just that weird adrenaline thing. And I said that, and I immediately got that butterflies in my stomach thing. There was something, even though I didn't see or necessarily have any way to think there really was something there. All of a sudden, those butterflies went off in my stomach, and it was there was something there, squaring up to me, it wanted to throw down. And I just stood there and I stood my ground. Eventually the feeling went away but it's for all I know, I imagine that I could have freaked myself out. Who knows? Right. But again, this whatever my son keeps on seeing that we do not see keeps on scaring him. And then there was one particular time, because it's always in the same corner except for once, there was one time where my wife was putting him to bed, and they're sitting on the side of the bed and she's reading him one of his bedtime stories. Before he reacts, she suddenly gets this feeling that there is something not nice up against the wall in front of her. And this is not the same wall, the corner where he always sees the thing. This is the opposite side of the room. Just something almost like she senses a presence there in that spot, and it doesn't feel nice. A split second after she has that feeling, my son looks at that wall and loses his poo the same way he always does when he looks at the corner and sees a thing. So it's like she sensed something before he saw it, and then he lost his mind. And it was just a lit up, bright room and a blank wall. And so seemed like there was something showing itself to only him that was scaring the crap out of him. And it was terrible and sad and made us sad. And we're getting frustrated. Like, normally if something is freaking out my wife, she'll tell me about it. And whether I say some prayers or just like address the issue out loud or something like that, like it will usually stop. And this was not stopping. And so like I eventually did some research, and I didn't want to buy like some white sage or something because white sage is endangered and a bunch of hippies are always ripping it up. And then the indigenous people who try and use it can't find it because it's being driven almost to extinction by all the hippie people who want to use it for their crystals and sage. And it's sad. It's a sad story. So I'm like researching other things, and I find some other type of sage that you can use that's not an endangered sage, and like a mix of sage and cedar. And I find a website where you can buy it from indigenous people, because like, if I'm going to buy this, I'd rather buy it from indigenous people who are hopefully treating the land respectfully. And I buy a bundle of sage and get a turkey feather and stuff and the things that you're supposed to do. I buy it, bring it home, trying to get my wife and kid out of the house so I can try and figure out how to do something with it. But it doesn't happen, but the stuff stops. It's almost like I have the stuff still sitting right now on the bedroom dresser, the bundle of sage in a brown paper bag and the feather right next to it, sitting on top of the dresser. And it's almost as if just bring that into the room made whatever was there messing with him decide, oh, he's serious, he wants me to stop. And it pretty much stopped. It lasted like 8 or 9 months. And I finally brought that stuff home, and as soon as it arrived and I brought it in the room, even though I didn't even get to burn it and use it yet, because I don't want to do that unless I get everyone out of the house, because you're supposed to open all the doors and windows and all this stuff, and he would run off into the street like a maniac because he's a toddler. And so, yeah, and so I haven't even used it, but just bringing it home, somehow whatever was messing with him decided, oh, he's serious, and it stopped. So that has finally, thankfully, stopped. But it was weird because he was never asleep. And even my wife had that weird corroborating personal experience of her own.
And it was always 100% in that room.
Yeah, always in that room, and always, except for the one time my wife noticed something, always in the one exact corner, no matter how much we rearrange things to like rule out pareidolia in his face.
Mm-hmm. Jeez, poor little guy.
Yeah, and never asleep. So it wasn't sleep. It wasn't night terrors or anything. He wasn't even sleepy. He'd be fighting just enough to go to bed. But thankfully, it has messed with him for a while.
Yeah, hopefully that thing stays away.
To this day.
What's that?
Yeah, like he still talks about it to this day. Like he's still something vivid in his mind, and he'll talk about it.
Oh,
and
I bet.
I'll go over to the corner, and we'll check out the corner and stuff. And he says that it's not there, or he'll say that it's sleeping. A lot of times he'll say that it's sleeping, and he's okay.
Oh,
so
he says, "Oh, it's sleeping right now, so it's okay."
Yeah, and so I don't know if he says it's sleeping because it's not there, or if he actually sees it sleeping, like God knows.
Right.
But whatever,
Lord.
as long as it's not messing with him, so that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the last like big thing. Everything else is pretty little. Like at work in the laboratory, like there's one time where I was standing in this narrow space in front of a fridge full of patient urine samples, and I was like opening the little fridge to do something, and there's only like maybe 2 feet behind me before a counter with a sink, and I'm facing away from that space, opening the little fridge, and I feel someone try and scoot past me in that little space, And it's not like I think I might feel someone like there's someone there squeezing past me. So I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And I kind of push my body up against the counter that this little mini fridge is on, so that whoever this is can finish squeezing by me. And as they finish squeezing by me, I turn to my left to look at them and apologize for like, just to be polite, even though I wasn't doing anything wrong, just to be polite. And I turn and there's no one there. So I've had something squeeze past me in the lab that was definitely a full on someone squeezing past me, even though no one was there. Not a maybe someone sort of kind of touched me. There was full on, they were touching me, squeezing past me. So that was weird. No one was there. My wife says that one thing that's weird in this house is almost every single night around the same time of the night, any dishes that happen to be in the sink will shift around always the same time. That's kind of odd. Who knows if that's anything or not. And then the most recent thing that has happened is there was just sometime in the last month or two, there was a couple times where my wife would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like something was pushing up from beneath the mattress, almost like lifting the mattress from beneath, and she'd feel her feet lift up a little bit with the movement of the mattress, and it would wake her up, and she'd be like, what's that? And one of our dogs sometimes goes and sleeps under the bed, so she like tried to see if it was the dog, but she wasn't there. She was somewhere else. And so she's like, oh, maybe I'm imagining it. And it happened 2 or 3 times, but the last time it happened, when it woke up with it like moving her feet, I was at work because I was working graveyards that night. I was at work, and so my son was just in the bed with her, and he was sleeping right next to her. And not only did it wake her up, it woke him up, and he looked at the bottom of the bed and said, Mama, what's that? And so that's weird, but that's the most recent thing that has happened. That's pretty much everything I can think of at the moment.
I think there's once or twice, I wouldn't be able to remember which episode, but where someone said that it was something that would, essentially it would be inside or just underneath of the mattress in between, the boards where the mattress is actually laying, where they can feel something coming up from underneath, because there wouldn't be a way to push from underneath the bed. At least I'm pretty sure that in one of the cases that was it, and that is just super damn creepy. Something inside or just weird. Underneath the mattress pushing.
Yeah. I guess it sounds like a lot of stuff, and it doesn't make sense to people. I guess because to me, I know this will sound insane, but I almost don't feel like much of an experiencer because I feel like I'm mostly paranormal adjacent. It's mostly happening to people around me, and it happens so much more to people around me. But to anyone who doesn't have experiences, it probably sounds like I have a shit ton. And so they probably think I'm crazy for saying I'm more adjacent to it than I am directly involved with it. But, it is what it is. Different levels of experience and perspective.
Yeah, it's all relative, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, when you grow up with it, and it is, some of your stories are happening to you or with you in them, and others you're just kind of watching from afar, which in some cases was a good thing. But thank you for sharing all that. And if any of your siblings ever wanted to come on and talk to me, they're more than welcome. That's an official invitation. I always like to get the other side of some of these stories are very interesting to hear. So that offer is out there. No pressure, of course. But yeah, thank you for taking all the time.
If you had time, I could tell you one thing that one of my sisters has told me recently that's freaky.
Sure.
But that's only. So I have a niece. She's about, 4 or 5 months older than Everett Kristen. So she's still pretty little. She's 3 herself still. She has always, like, some weird stuff happened. And this is the same sister that I had the dream about and stuff. There's always, every house she moves in, there's weird stuff. It's not so much that it's the house, it's more like it's her. Though some of the houses have been more active than others. And ever since my little niece was born, like, she's always seen weird things, and she's always talked to people who weren't there and would sit underneath the kitchen table having a conversation, giggling to someone who's not there, almost like an imaginary friend type thing. And so it kind of freaks us out because with our family, it's like, is she having an imaginary friend or is she seeing something? Like, who knows? And it's kind of weird. My sister has seen a doppelganger of her husband in that house. Her husband has seen a doppelganger of her. Like, there's all sorts of weird things that happen in there. This particular story, this happened recently. Her dad was visiting her. Her daughter was playing in like the next room or whatever. And then the daughter came into the room like really, really upset, saying, people, your mom is sad and she's lost and she doesn't know where she is and she wants to go home. And she starts saying all these things to my sister's dad about his mom. And she starts talking about how like she hurt you when you were little and she hurt you and she was so mean to you when you were little and why did she do that to you? And she's lost and doesn't know where she is and she wants to know what's going on and where her dog is. And she's like, this little girl is visibly upset by this. And then she starts singing the Itsy Bitsy Spider, right? Like Itsy Bitsy Spider, like whatever. It's just full on creep factor. And this goes on for a few minutes, and like my sister and her dad's jaw is just like floored. And then she's done and she goes off and goes back to playing. And the weird thing is that his mother passed away just a few years ago, like maybe 2018 or so. I don't remember if she was pregnant with her daughter or just after she was born or whatever, but her grandma, her dad's mom, passed away right around that time, and her daughter never met her. She doesn't know much about her. She did pass away, like she had like Alzheimer's or dementia, one of the two, and passed away in one of the care homes right around that time. She did have a dog that when she went to the care home had to be given to someone else, and the dog was fine. It just went to a new family. That woman was, I guess, physically abusive towards my sister's dad when he was young. And one of the weird things is sometimes in between being all evil and stuff, she would frequently sing Itsy Bitsy Spider to him. So he was just floored and freaked out and stuff. But yeah, there's no reason that little girl should know any of that stuff. And she just, out of the blue, was visibly upset talking about that to them and then went back to playing.
Creepy damn kids, man. God. He's going, I don't want to hear that. No.
Yeah. This is the same guy who was mostly atheistic and didn't believe my mom about the thing in the bedroom.
Right. Oh, there you go. There's another good example for him.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Nope. Yeah. Kids laughing or singing songs that they would have no idea that a relative of theirs sung. No. Before I let you go, did you see on Patreon where all the Bigfoot folks they're losing their minds because the poll that I put up ended and the subterranean strangeness ended? The fight. Hilarious. So I wanted to bring that up to you because I'm going, I wonder if Randy wanted the subterranean or if he wanted the skunk ape episode.
I want both. Well, they're all going to hate me for this and I'm going to get a bunch of shit as soon as they hear this, but I voted for the subterranean.
So did I. They probably figured that I would, though.
It's probably your fault because I read The Descent because you talked about it so damn much, and I read The Descent, and it was effing amazing, and I sent it to my mom, and she's read it now, and she's all freaked out, but
yeah,
that's an amazing freaking book. I still haven't read it. I haven't read the sequel. I don't know if you've read the sequel, if it's good or not, but
I have. I prefer the first one. It's good to read the second one. It's very different. That's all I'll say. It's extremely different. So The Descent is probably my most favorite fictional book of all time, besides some of my Terry Goodkind, like ultimate nerd books that I love, and Stephen King, of course. Dude, he's amazing. Rest in peace, Terry. But no, so what I was going to say, I voted for Subterranean Strangeness because I'm just fascinated after reading something like The Descent. Not that I essentially feel like there's Hadels down there. I actually would think it was pretty cool if they were, but I'm with your mom. Terrifying as hell. But we will do, but to any, all the patrons listening, it's like, I'll do Skunk Ape after Subterranean. Don't worry. They're gonna.
And I love the big guy. I love all
they're
the
gonna
stuff.
Get you, dude.
All the time, she's like, you want to see Bigfoot so damn bad that you're not going to see it. We're going to be driving through the woods, and I'm going to be the one who see it because I don't give a crap, and you're going to be so mad because you care too much.
Yeah, that's how it works.
She jokes with me like that. Yeah. That I want to see it too bad. So I love Big Guy. I love Biggie. But
I do too.
Yeah, just for, and I know we'll talk about that a million times anyway. So just for something different, I voted for the Subterranean.
Exactly, just something a little different for this time, and
bring the hate. Right.
Yeah, well, because I voted in my own poll, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I did. I clicked on Subterranean Strangeness because I'm like, well, we can do Skunk Ape after this, but first let's do something a little different. But yeah, well, no, cool. You read The Descent. That's amazing. See, and everybody makes the mistake of going, oh, I don't need to read The Descent. I've watched the movie. It has not; those two things have nothing to do with each other.
The very first chapter of the book sounds like the damn movie, and I believe you're the one who said, yeah, they claim he'd never heard about it before, but that first damn chapter in that movie are pretty damn close. I think he ripped it off, whoever made the movie.
And he did, and the movie is good. It's still creepy, but it doesn't compare. I mean, it not anywhere near reading just that first freaking chapter. You're like, oh my good God. Like, you want to stay up for 3 days and read that thing because it just hooks you right. It's horrifying. It hooks you right in,
the book
right?
is like such an epic freaking journey. Like, so much different stuff.
Yeah, and looking at the back cover blurb, you'd have it's hard even really to describe that book. But anyway, I'm constantly talking about The Descent, but that's one of my, just like, but isn't that funny? Because you got The Descent is one of my top 3 books, and then I say Dumb and Dumber is my top 3 movies. So I'm eclectic, I guess, is what you would say. But well, Randy, thank you so much. Thanks for all this time today. My God, you had time off, and I'm taking like 3 hours of your day today. But thank you so much.
And you had enough time, so I could get it all out.
No, that's awesome. I love it.
I was waiting for you to kick me off. I kept on pausing for the story. She's going to say it's time to go.
No. I love it. It's amazing. I love people that are willing to actually share every aspect of it, because it's in those little tiny details that you think are maybe not such a big deal. When I air it, somebody might pick it up and say, "Ooh, that for me, that's what got me to contact Shannon, and now I'm sharing my stories because that is a corroboration for somebody." You've heard me say that a million times, but sometimes that's what works. So I appreciate somebody that's willing to be like, "Well, this was kind of a small thing to me, but maybe," and then it's actually a big deal to somebody else. So it is very much appreciated.
I was a little hesitant because my stories aren't going to be as cool as Pam's stories. Pam's stuff is amazing, but
they're just different, right?
It'll be cool for someone else.
They're just different. Yeah, they're just different. So, and it depends on what lens you're looking at things through.
Yeah, and so with my mom, I would say she's almost like a Pam with the way she sees things, but in her mind, she's looking at demons and stuff.
Right. Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So much stuff she sees sometimes.
Right.
Like it's almost like on that level.
Yeah. Some person would see an elemental or a fae, another person is going to see a demon. So yeah, it's just with what lens are you looking through? Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Randy. We will be in touch, and I want to hear if, of course, hopefully not, but sometimes, as you know, if you talk about this stuff at length, things can kick up. So let me know if that happens, and if we need to actually find some true, legit white sage and to handle business there at your house.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Shannon.